The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. Any rebroadcast, reproduction, or other use of this broadcast or podcast without the express written consent of Spaced Out Radio or Spaced Out Radio Limited is strictly prohibited. Listener discretion is advised.
Bumblefoot. Bumblefoot.
Are you experienced?
Stop right there!
From high atop the mountains of British Columbia to you listening around the world, this is Spaced Out Radio with host Dave Scott.
They let us play with all our toys. They let us think that we're big boys. They let us make the louder noise, but we ain't rule the world. They let us think we're Superman.
You can follow us on our website, spacedoutradio.com, on iTunes and TuneIn. Follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, on Facebook at Spaced Out Radio Show, or on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show.
I try to act so cool, but you know I'm just a fool for you. For you. I will stop till I reach the top just to be there with you.
Dave, oh Dave, are you playing with Bigfoot and aliens again?
Dad, you gotta stop haunting the ghost. It's scaring them.
All right, seriously, put down the pointy sticks.
Oh, the deeper I fall.
Okay! Game on! Game on! Game on!
The password is...
All right.
Buckle up, space travelers. It's time to go for a ride on Spaced Out Radio. Mr. Bumblefoot, Dave is ready for liftoff.
I try to act so cool, but you know I'm just a fool for you.
Seriously, Dave? Really? Aren't you a little old for a tinfoil hat?
Hello. Toby. Bye-bye. Love you. Bye-bye.
Please take your seat above all. There will be exit. Prepare for takeoff. Start. 2, 1. Boost to ignition and lift off.
I'm such a lucky guy, 'cause after all this time, it's like the deeper I go, the deeper I fall. The deeper I go.
Good evening and welcome to Spaced Out Radio. Tonight I am your host, Dave Scott. It's great to have you along for the ride on this Friday, August 18th. Saturday, August 19th, if you're on the East Coast or across the pond. Hope you've had a great day and night. We are live right here in the Great White North on top of the beautiful mountains of central British Columbia as we are here 7 days a week. Let's welcome in everyone listening in on our terrestrial stations. WQEE 99 Rock the Key down in Noonan, Georgia, home of The Walking Dead. We We are live as well on the United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM in New Orleans, and over 160 countries around the world. We're also live at spacedoutradio.com, Spreaker, KTLK, The Fringe FM, Renegade Talk Radio out of Las Vegas, the High Plains Talk Radio Network, and if you're listening in on Revolution Radio, remember the Double R Machine is a donation station financed by you, the valued listener. Head on over to freedomslips.com and donate today. If you like our theme music, get your horns up for Mr. Ron Bumblefoot THAL, formerly of Guns N' Roses, currently of Art of Anarchy. Yes, Bumblefoot is the official music of Spaced Out Radio. I know you're liking that, Goddess Michelle on Twitter. Thank you so much. Also, you can follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. On Instagram, you can follow me at Dave Scott, SOR. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. Listen to us on iHeartRadio in the USA, TuneIn, iTunes, and TalkStream Live as well. And, of course, our website is spacedoutradio.com. Now, if you want to take part in this show, you got to do me a favor, because I want to connect with you guys. Okay, what you got to do is you got to sign into one of the chat rooms, because we don't take calls around here. Go over to Revolution Radio's chat room, Spreaker, the UPRN chat room, or join us on Facebook at the SOR Space Travelers Club. Or if you're on Twitter, use the hashtag Spaced Out Radio. I will connect with you live during the show as well. And yes, it is me and me alone. Now, if you head to our website for $5 a month, you can become a member of the SOR Space Travelers Club. You can also shop at our store, pick up a t-shirt, poster, stickers, read the Encounter online. That's where they hide my blog. You can also fill out an SOR Sightlines report. If you've had something strange that you would like investigated, we'll do that for you. You can also check out Tim Doyle's UFO Seekers videos along with Leslie Mitchell Clark's Contact TV as well for your viewing entertainment. There are very few paranormal researchers out there that actually have the title of doctor in front of their name. That's what makes tonight's guest so special. Dr. Fredrick Woodard is a hypnotherapist with a PhD who uses his professionalism to also research the paranormal. Dr. Woodard is one of those rare commodities that we have discussed so much on this show that we need more of. Yes, all the doctors and scientists out there, get your butts into the paranormal field so that way we can figure this out together. Dr. Woodard is someone who is not, someone who takes this very lightly. He's not only highly educated, but also takes this field of research that we call the paranormal very seriously. So many of his colleagues don't share that passion, though, and they literally shake their heads at his research because their own scientific minds cannot comprehend the supernatural. Dr. Woodard emphasizes understanding and empathy as he also sets judgments and beliefs aside as he helps his clients and paranormal researchers reach their goals, values, in what they are looking for. Dr. Fredrick Woodard, thank you so much for coming on Spaced Out Radio for the first time. How are you?
I'm good. I appreciate having the opportunity to speak with you about my work, and I have a lot of respect for your show. A number of people have drifted through my research in my office mentioning your show, so I just wanted to let you know that.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay.
Let's, Dr. Woodard, to have someone of your stature on here, we don't get a lot of doctors on this show. I'm going to tell you that right now. In fact, there's not many doctors in the paranormal field in general. Growing up and you going with your education, you were a man of science. Where did the paranormal fit into this for you?
That's an interesting question. I noticed that different things would happen, and I was thinking about how it all ties in. It's the idea of expanding awareness and how at different moments in my life, things just didn't seem to be so simple as the logical mind had explained things to people. Hypnosis and the paranormal are two areas that kind of show there's something more going on. But what is that? That's the hard part because it's not something we're often trained to understand. So then when you have these experiences, you wonder what's going on. And so that's where I kind of was very interested in hypnosis and how it can help expand consciousness and our awareness. And we only use like 15% of our brain is what they say. So what's the other 85 doing, And I find that fascinating. So I started off with, I fell into a theory on perception that kind of fit for me with hypnosis and altered states. And then I fell into qualitative research, which was a very complicated process, very time-consuming, but where you interview people and you can really pull out meaning if you take a lot of time to do that. And that's where I started developing a theory on hypnosis and developing connections to hypnosis and the paranormal and trying to understand what's happening for people and why some people can see things and have experiences and other people can't. I also think the idea of being a psychologist was important because there are people that aren't really seeing things. They're psychotic and those things aren't real, even though they sound very much like people that see things that are real. And then trying to validate those experiences is even harder because they're subjective. But I've been working on that for a long time. It's very, very fascinating to me, and I think very rewarding. I think that the spiritual, the paranormal, is very connected to a lot of people, and it speaks to people in a way that is different than just the everyday world.
Did you have paranormal experiences as a kid that you were more accepting to it, or did you just start researching on your own out of curiosity just to see if there was something there?
Well, it's kind of I've had a handful of odd experiences. I was trying to think about that, what experiences actually did that to me. I know that my grandfather had a heart attack, and he believed that he got healed when he was holding Immaculate Mary. It's not a medal, but it's something in the church. And he wasn't very religious, but he believed that when he touched that, he got healed. He lived to be 89 years old, and he had a heart attack when he was younger. He didn't think he would live that long. I had odd experiences here and there that were. I was driving on my motorcycle one day, and my girlfriend at the time, she had an older guy that was interested in her. And as I was driving, I said, she's talking to him right now. And it was like 6 at night or something. So the next day I said, hey, 6 o'clock last night, were you talking to Mike? And she said, what, were you following me? And I said, no, it just came in my head. I don't know why. But things like that. And then I didn't quite understand how that stuff worked. But I had client experiences telling me things, and I saw things, on television, and I read things, and I was fascinated with what's really going on. I've always been fascinated with that. Hypnosis is one of the things I really took to because it helps people open up in my mind. It's more like dehypnotizing yourself rather than hypnotizing. And the way most people think of hypnosis that aren't educated in hypnosis, that's what I think you're dehypnotizing people from, believing things that aren't true or perceiving in a very rigid way without opening up your mind to more is being hypnotized. And to dehypnotize someone is to wake them up that there's more, there's alternatives, there's different ways of seeing things. All that stuff has fascinated me. So I've been exploring that. Most of my research, my journal articles and my research has all been free. I don't get paid for it. I don't charge anyone for it. And the only thing that I get a little bit of money for, a small amount, in the royalties is my book that just came out, Perceptual Hypnosis, A Spiritual Journey to Expanding Awareness, which kind of talks about my whole process of going through this, the theory, the issues, the way to expand your consciousness. And I have a CD attached to it, too, to kind of help people kind of get in that space. I kind of look at, like, altered states, the paranormal. What do people meditate for, and what do people do self-hypnosis for? It's to expand. It's to grow, And so that's what's always fascinated me.
I think it's fantastic that you have taken this leap of faith because, let's face it, you are a man of science. Tell us about your education.
I have 3 master's degrees, one from the university. Hold on a second. The name changed from when I was there, and I just want to get it right. It's down in Georgia, and it's a light in the world, really. It's a great place. The University of West Georgia in Carrollton, Georgia. It's a fantastic, it's part of the state university system. They have a humanistic psychology program, and I believe there's some transpersonal stuff going on there now, which is a more modern term for the parapsychological aspect. And they they had a number of really excellent teachers there. Before I got there, I kind of missed them, but Bill Roll, who was who studied the poltergeist experiences, he taught there, and so did Raymond Moody, who did the near-death experiences. But when I got there, I actually met a woman, Dr. Ann Richards, who really had a lot to do with my writing and helped me learn to have the confidence to write. I wrote my first paper in her class, and she said, "Wow, that's great. You should publish that." And so I submitted it for publication, and this guy who had 25 years experience was top of the field. He just trashed my article, so I brought it to her and I said, "No, I don't think I'm any good. I'm not a good writer. See what he said?" And she said, "Well, let me see it." And she read it and she looked at me and she said, "That's politics. Submit it to another journal." And I eventually got it published, and I realized that, I had no confidence at that point, but she helped me gain confidence and realize there's different points of view. And some people's ideas, another part of my book is the idea of beliefs and things that stop people from opening up, stop people from being able to see more, because they're too caught up in, I've only experienced this, that can't be true. But we know that other things are true. Just because we don't experience everything doesn't mean that it doesn't exist.
Do you believe then, Doc, that a lot of people out there, and let's say the majority of the population, is closed-minded to anything extrasensory or supernatural because they are so inundated with the 24/7 society now? I mean, we're not in the days of 30 to 50, even 100 years ago, where everything was based around the farm and the church. We're into a whole different realm of life right now.
Well, that's a very complicated question, because I think there's a lot of people that are open, but they're afraid to talk about it, because one of the themes that I actually had an article in my local newspaper when I first started my work that came out, and the theme was "You're Not Crazy." And most of the people, when they'd come and they'd tell me their story, and a lot of them, it's all confidential. I don't share people's names because it's for psychological research, and a lot of them would say, "Do you think I'm crazy?" when they were done telling me their story, or that people laughed at them or made fun of them, and they had to overcome that. But there was some very incredible stories people told me that were fantastic, but the whole idea, and then there's the media, which I have a chapter on the media and things like that in my book. It's the media kind of shapes people too. I mean, I had put an incident, and I think it was 90-something. I forget what the year was. I forget which Super Bowl it was, but they had a Pepsi or a Coke commercial, and they poured the soda into a fish tank, and then the fish did like circus moves in the fish tank. So the next day, kids all over the country were pouring soda into the fish tanks, and they had to announce, "Please don't do that." It just shows how powerful television is and the media is in shaping people's behaviors. So there's a lot of things affecting people, but I think there's a lot more people that are open to it. It's just they're very private about sharing it because they're fearful of being judged or made fun of, I think. So.
And I would agree. And you know what? That's pretty much the nail on the head with what it's like up here in Canada, because we're such a passive society up here, and we're a tolerant society that we just kind of just sit laid back, and we make fun of things and we laugh at things, but when you get down to the deep and personal, somebody will always tell you a story, whether it's lights in the sky, weird sounds of the forest, or knocking on the walls at night in their house. There's always a story out there. It's a matter of trying to gain that trust so that person who may ridicule can become a believer as well, is it not?
Right. That's very true. And it's having an open mind. It's the whole idea of what that theory I talked about, that perceptual theory talked about, like the qualities were an open and flexible perceived universe, which is an open and flexible view of the world, positive experiences in your world, rich and diverse personal meanings and perceptions of the world, and the ability to identify with others, which kind of means being able to see another person's point of view, even if you haven't had that point of view. That's the hardest thing of all, is to realize that. But I've realized as a psychologist and that I have clients come all the time and present something I've never imagined happening, or the combination of two experiences, like having lost a child and having a new child and feeling guilty that you're having a new child because you're still mourning your lost child. And there's so many things people aren't prepared for, and you have to have compassion for that, for other people's experiences. I like multicultural things. I have Native American in me. As a matter of fact, my great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather was Chief Mattacawanda at the Abenaki up in the northern New England area. He was the chief of the whole area back in the 1690s, and the whole Native American aspect is so different than the culture that's not Native American, and to kind of have respect for other cultures and the way they operate, and you get to see a different point of view, and I think those are important too, because there are other ways of seeing things, stuff like that. So.
Do you believe in coincidence then when it comes to the paranormal, or do you believe that everything is supposed to happen for a reason after everything you've seen and researched?
Well, here's a funny thing. I was thinking about that today, the whole idea of synchronicity, because some of the things that happened to me personally, little tiny things, like one time I was meditating, and in this process of meditating, the difference between meditation and hypnosis in my mind is that meditation is just an openness, where hypnosis, you have a goal. I think it's simple and you go to the same space, but there are people that have made huge distinctions, intellectually made it very difficult to understand because there's all these details involved in both. But as a human being, I don't pass through zones. There's not a sign saying, oh, here you are, and here's the next level, but you just kind of go there. But I remember one time I was doing hypnosis, and I was in college, and I was poor, and I was trying to imagine, having resources and money. And then the next day I went out my front steps in my apartment, and there was pennies all over the steps. And there was never any money on my steps ever, before or after. And I thought, well, this is odd. I'm thinking about money, and there's money on my things like that. But at the same time, I think that there are coincidences, because I was trying to think I was watching some B movie when I was studying one day, and I was at a friend's house watching their house for them, and this is a funny story, but this is coincidence, and I think it kind of applies to Freud's idea that sometimes a cigar is just a cigar. But I was watching TV, and there was someone down in the basement, and they were doing something, and the person down upstairs said, kill the power, and the whole house, the power went out, the TV went off, all the power went off. It was the freakiest experience. Wow, that was real. But that was just a coincidence. There was no meaning to that. You know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean. And the reason why I asked you that question is, earlier this week, I had a very, very strange situation happen right on this show. We had a guest on named Katie Ackerman-Webb from Vancouver Spooks Paranormal for a monthly feature that we do called Ghosts of the Great White North. And she starts talking about this pub in a town called Pitt Meadows, or a city called Pitt Meadows. It's about 35 minutes east of Vancouver. I had no idea who this lady was. Okay, literally, our previous guest had pulled out, so I was scrambling to find someone. I got a hold of her on Monday, said, can you join us for Ghosts of the Great White North? She's like, absolutely, not a problem. Never talked to her before that night of the show. And so she starts describing this pub called Roosters. Now, about 14 years ago, I had one of my former hockey players that I coached as a kid get killed outside that bar. And here she is describing him, or her psychic was describing him hanging out in the bar.
Yeah, that's not a coincidence. I think that's synchronicity, which Carl Jung spoke of. I remember Carl Jung, when I read all his work, I remember he talked about there was a picture in his office of someone, and it fell off of his bookcase and cracked. And he noted the time, and later found out that was exactly when that person died.
Mm-hmm.
called synchronicity and a causal effect. It's like not logic. It's some other kind of meaning, but it has meaning. It's a meaningful experience. And what I would say is I wouldn't know what the meaning of that was, but that it was personal for you and them, but that definitely had meaning. You know what I mean? That's not just chance, although some critics would say everything's chance. You know, I just think some things are and some things aren't. I think sometimes it's very odd how things happen. They're not just coincidences. I think they have purpose, you know. And,
it was the strangest thing, Doc. It was the absolute strangest thing, because literally we started talking about it, and very rarely on this show, because hosting a radio show, I'm kind of a mouthpiece. You know, I'm kind of a mouthpiece, right. and I didn't know where to turn. I never ummed and uh'd so much in my radio life than I did that night, which is killer for what I do. But
right. Well, that had a personal meaning. That's I don't think coincidence. You know, there's a meaning there, maybe just for you to know. You know.
Well, we are trying to get in there for an investigation now, because I want to see if I can hook up with Derek. He was 21 years old when he was killed.
Yeah, there's an interesting thing. There's the ones that you know are a meaning, like Young with the picture falling, and then there's the ones that you know are coincidence, like me watching the TV show and the power going out in the house at the same time that the guy says turn the power off. But then there's the in-between ones, you know, where you're not quite sure what's going on, but something's going on, you know?
Absolutely. And I'll tell you another story that I heard today. During the evacuation of the forest fires here a month ago, where our town was evacuated for 15 days, there is a museum here that I do a paranormal tour on to raise money for the museum. And Sheila, the caretaker of the museum, when she got evacuated, she grabbed all her stuff and she, set the alarm to the museum and then evacuated with everybody in town. Well, she comes back from the evacuation and there are Cheerios everywhere, tucked into the cushions, in her shoes, going up the stairs. Okay, Cheerios everywhere, all spread over her counter. Now, she doesn't have a box of Cheerios. So she cleaned up all these Cheerios that were spread out, and she tells me today when I'm down there, she says, Dave, you're not going to believe this. She goes, I go into my towel drawer today to get a towel to go take a shower. There's Cheerios in the drawer. I go into my sock drawer to get a pair of socks out for this morning. There's Cheerios, like somebody just dumped a box of Cheerios in my sock drawer.
Yeah, that's very odd.
Fun way to learn that there's a ghost in the house, man. So would that be something that we could say is a synchronistic sign that somebody from the other side is trying to get her attention, obviously through the Cheerios, but possibly has a message as to why they are doing that?
It's possible, yes. It's an unknown. You have to investigate that and try to figure it out. That's the whole point. But yeah, that's definitely not something that just happened. It has meaning. Again, it's like understanding the meaning behind what's going on. That's the hard part. That's the investigation part. And sometimes we find out and sometimes we don't. What I was going to say about the in-between ones, I had one when I was doing when I was with a couple people and we were doing, one of those investigations. We went into this house that seemed to be haunted, and at one point we were using the spirit box, and I said, how can I help you? Because there was a voice saying something. It was hard to make out what. A couple of words came out, and the word impossible comes out. So even if the voice box is just scanning the radio and randomly picking words out of radio stations, that's an odd coincidence. It's the only time I've done this for a couple of years that word ever came out. But you can't, it's not proof in and of itself. You know what I mean?
No, I fully understand that, but in the end, do we really know what we are searching for or why we are searching for it?
Well, sometimes that's the hard part. You're waiting for those experiences that will help you understand. In my opinion, it's very difficult because it's also very hard because you have to have a lot of resources in some cases. Like when I was doing that one with at the house where that Impossible came out, the lights went on and off a couple of times. But is that a ghost or is that, an electrical problem? You have to have someone come out and investigate the to prove. It's hard. It's hard to know for sure.
So, in your professional opinion, what are we actually studying then?
Well, I don't know. I mean, in some cases, I believe there's connections to the other world, and in some cases, I think it's just, it's hard to know. I mean, I wouldn't say outright that I know for sure, but I can give you an example of something that did happen, just popped in my head. You asked me earlier. I had a client and a dear friend of mine that died the same week. One, my friend, she had a second heart transplant, and it didn't take. And I had a client who had health issues, and her health went bad, and she died. Both of them had been talking to me about the other side and about life after death, and having conversations about all that. Within the next week, my lights went on and off a number of times. My television, I'd turn it off to go to bed, and it would turn back on. And the craziest thing was my CD player in my car that had never, ever opened by itself several times. The second time it opened by itself while I was in the car, I said, I don't know which one you are, but I get it. Okay, you don't have to do this anymore. I get it. You still exist. And all that stuff stopped. Is that proof? Oh, that's not proof by itself to prove to anyone scientifically that it was really happening, but that's not something that happens to me on a normal basis, So I see it as like personally, I think it suggests that that's what happened, but to prove it scientifically, that's very difficult.
But on the flip side, what is proof? Because I'll tell you right now, I have enough proof for me to know that this phenomenon is real. I've been face to face with ghosts. I've been face to face with Bigfoot.
There's like for example, I forgot who it was, but there was someone that did some really good experiments on telepathy, and they even did an experiment with a major rock band, and it was very, very valid, and it pointed out that there is telepathy. It's definitely true that we can transmit ideas, from one place to another. So there has been scientific studies that have proved these things are real. It's just when you're in the actual situation. It's like I've been doing research with people's subjective experience, and that's for a long time, and I just started doing the ghost hauntings and things like that recently. But I was in one place, and a woman used an app on her cell phone and was seeing orbs, and I was sitting next to her in just the right light in which the dust on the other side of her phone and the orbs were like matching, And so I knew that app was just not so good because it was just picking up dust particles. But I know that some of the other equipment does pick up orbs, so it's just hard to know. All the situations, but I definitely know something's going on. Proving it and understanding it is the hard part.
That is the hard part, because that leads into our next category of what we are talking about. Because in your profession, with what you do, being a man of science, there's a lot of your colleagues who either don't agree or just shake their head at what you were doing, or maybe in their opinion wasting time on. How do you deal with the colleagues?
Well, I have a lot of colleagues that have open minds, and there's a handful of them around the country that are very much into it, like Charles Tart in California, and Raymond Moody, who did the near-death experiences. But there are people that they haven't had the experience, so they don't think it's real because they haven't had the experience, and that's where they're coming from, I think. And then there's the other problem of really psychotic people who sound the exact same way as someone that's had an experience. They can talk that same way, but it's all really kind of not real. You know, it'd be like somebody believing someone's in love with them and they're not. You know, and they're having telepathic communication with them, and they're gonna, you know, it gets scary. And I think a lot of the psychologists experience that part of it, and they don't see the other part of it. They don't see I think healthy experiences, there's something real in the world. It connects to you. It's not a bad problem. It doesn't cause you trouble. It's something positive, you know, or it's benign. But there's that too, I think, so they're exposed to the psychotic part of it, you know.
Why do you think, in your opinion, that mainstream science has such a lack of respect in even wanting to investigate this field at all, even though so many people out there have had experiences, and the experiences they've had, if they stood in front of a court of law, you know, you could get charged and convicted of murder for less than some of the experiences and evidence that people have in the paranormal field.
Well, right. Well, you know, an interesting thing is I got exposed to the work of John Mack at Harvard, and he did a lot of UFO stuff, and I read his books, and his books were fantastic. They were awesome. I mean, he did some really good work, and I would say, historically, he was one of the first people that the committee at Harvard approved his work. They didn't, you know, Franz Mesmer back in the day, in, I don't know, 17-something, he got investigated, and they said, oh, it was just imagination. But the funny thing about all this stuff is it's not so black and white, because he believed magnets had something to do with aligning people, and now they're using magnets in medicine, too, in a different way to help heal people and work with people. So some of this stuff comes back around again, you know, indirectly, and we just forget about the people that talked about it. But your question and the way what the aspect you're talking about, I can give you a simple example. It's just human nature. The first doctor that found out that washing your hands would reduce infections, they laughed at him. You know, the other doctors laughed at him. And he was saying, no, wash your hands. There won't be any infections. And people will be healthier. And they just made fun of him. You know, and throughout history, that's been true. The guy that figured out that our blood circulates in our body, they made fun of him. You know, so it's been the story of mankind. Every discovery in our lifetime, neuroplasticity has been one of those big things. They've learned that the brain, the nerves in the body can reconnect to a different part of the brain and still work, so that your arm, the nerves in your arm can go to the site where you see and actually allow your arm to work. But that was like, they wouldn't allow that literature to get published for a while. There's a lot of people not allowing it to be published. And then finally, one editor in one journal published it, and then a number of books came out, and the knowledge started becoming known to everybody. You know, so there's always a resistance to change, I think, throughout history.
But
it's just always been there.
But this one, Dr. Woodard, is so in your face. And the reason why it's in your face is we all know the inevitable. We are all going to die.
Right.
We are all going to die, so it's not like, you know, studying water or space that's infinite. We know we have a beginning and we have an end. The religious believe we're going to heaven. The Darwinists believe that we're one and done.
Right. Well, you know, the interesting thing is our body may be coming to an end, and with that, maybe our emotions, because what I understand from some of my research and some of my experiences has been that when you're like not in your body, there's this lack of emotion. There's a clarity in vision, and there's an ability to see things, and that's where all these controversial arguments and discussions come. I remember one experience where somebody saw somebody that they never saw with their eyes before. And then I remember reading about a neurologist who said, oh, it was just memories being reconnected. And so, how could you remember something you never saw? So that didn't make any sense. But I think that whether our soul and our mind go on, that might, that's not so clear. That's really not, no one's been able to disprove it as well as they can't prove it. You can't disprove it, I just think there's more to it than people think. And there's a lot of, stories. I remember a story from one of my clients was that he was with his father in the nursing home, and his father was dying, and his father had kind of gone into a state where he was kind of talking to himself, or a dream state, and then he came out of it, and he looked at his son, and he said, I don't get it. I saw your sister, and there were two little children, and they were calling me Grandpa, and his son-in-law, the client's brother-in-law, was sitting next to him and burst out into tears because the sister who died earlier had had 2 miscarriages, but they'd never told anybody. And it was like, wow, that's kind of an interesting story.
Well, do you think then that mainstream science refutes this evidence that people are getting because they don't want to be the first? Because sometimes you don't want to be the first on things. You want to let someone else discover it, take the heat, before you come in the back door and say, yeah, I support this theory.
Well, it could be. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I think there's fear involved, and then there's the idea of proof, like real absolute proof. You can't prove something, so you don't want to make a statement on it. I look at it like being a pioneer. We're in an area that's hard to understand, and we're waiting for those moments where we can understand it. But throughout history, just as I've said in other ways, not just the fear, there's been stories throughout history. I remember reading several different interesting stories about, like Ulysses S. Grant, for example. He was supposed to be with Abraham Lincoln on the day Abraham Lincoln was assassinated. His wife sent 5 frantic messages to him that day saying, we need to leave and go home to New Jersey now. We need to leave and go home to New Jersey now. And he gave in and went home with her. He was on the hit list. And then he became president. And you wonder, was something intervening? Was something happening that... And I heard a story about George Washington, too, when they were at Valley Forge, or where they had almost given up, and he was really down on himself, and he went into his tent, and supposedly he was shown the future of the United States and what good it would do in the world, and he came out of that night more ready to go, and they turned it around. And I don't know. These stories, you hear them all the time throughout history of things that happened to people that kind of helped people, And my clients, a lot of sometimes they tell stories that kept them going when they really didn't know how to keep going.
I can understand that, but in the mainstream science of things, because the paranormal, in my opinion, and I don't know if you'll agree or not, to me it's anarchic right now. We have too many people claiming opinion as science. We have people out there who have been saying they're conducting scientific research, but they haven't stepped foot in a science lab since probably junior high. And I think it's making a real mockery of the field when we see that, number one. But number two, seeing these very intelligent people refuting or even refusing to go down this rabbit hole that we call the paranormal, even though we could solve some of life's greatest mysteries, to me is very unscientific on its own as well, if they're refusing to research the evidence.
Right. Well, I'm a member of the Society for Scientific Exploration, and those are all PhDs and doctors of different fields that are very open. Ian Stevenson, who was down at the University of Virginia, who did a lot of reincarnation work with children, he was a member of the society too, and he did a lot of reincarnation work. And there's some really good people that are very open to all this stuff and are exploring it and making arguments for it, and even theoretical papers that are suggesting why this would be real and how this should be So there's a lot of good people out there too, but there is resistance to them by other people. And like I said, I think it's, several things. One is we've got our cultural issues that like shape us. Then there's the media. And then the other thing is that, that they haven't experienced it. Like I said earlier, most people, if they don't experience something, they don't realize that there's another alternative. When I was in a horrible motorcycle accident, and I'm lucky I'm fine today, and I can walk and everything, and I had to wait all day for a doctor to come back from vacation because all the doctors in the hospital couldn't operate on my leg. They wouldn't. They came in, nope, can't do that. Nope, can't do that. Well, he came in, and he fixed my leg, and in the process of healing one day, I felt good. This was months after. I walked around the block, and when I walked around the block, I couldn't walk for 2 days. I couldn't walk. It was so painful. There was so much pain in my leg. I could not even walk for 2 days. And I realized something. I learned something from that experience. Not that I recommend those kind of things to learn. That my old me, I would have saw me walking down the street and said, "Oh, he's fine," and that would have been the end of it. He's fine. I would have never thought that he could be hurt later from what he was doing now. And so opening your mind to different experiences is hard for people because they just assume based on what they know or what they've been told or what they've experienced. And some of it's what they experienced through their families and through schooling and culture and taught by people around them and their peers. And some people are really good at only keeping friends that are just like them. And, the more you have diverse friends, the more you're open to new ideas. And so I love new ideas, and I think one of the things about movies I was thinking about today too is the really good movies, what they do is they really shock you with like a whole different twist at the end of the movie, and everybody loves that. But yet we're also resistant to change. That's how I see that.
So in the perfect world, what has to be done by the scientific community in order to break open this Pandora's box that we call paranormal evidence?
Well, another aspect that just popped in my head that I've thought about before, too, is the whole money thing. Like, I do all my research for free, and like I said, the only benefit I'm going to get is a couple dollars on each book that I sell for my perceptual hypnosis book. But before, all the work I did, all the journal articles I published, and all the research I do, it's all free, and I don't get paid for it. Well, science, most of the people in science, they're working, and they're getting a paycheck. And what are they going to get paid for doing that? Who's going to pay for that? I did my own research also because a lot of times when you're doing research for someone, you have to do what they want. And I just want to explore the experiences and find out what they offer. I don't want to have an agenda, that's someone else's. And so I am very limited in what I can do because I only, have so much time. But I don't think there's like a motivation for scientists to explore it. Who's going to pay them, and what are they going to accomplish? That's probably part of it. But then their egos get involved, and like I said, if I haven't experienced it, it's not real.
And a lot of people are like that in today's day and age. So when you look at the state of the paranormal today, how would you rate it?
Well, I think, there's some good work coming out here and there, but I think it's a free-for-all in some aspects, too. But so is everything else at this point. We have way too much media going on, way too much stuff being popped out. And, it's like my book, I went the traditional route and found a publisher, and that's a very hard process because it can take a year for them to get back to you and say, oh, yes, we'll take your book, or, oh, no, we won't. And I've read some stuff that people have self-published that's horrible. Just absolutely horrible. And it's like a balance. Is it good people can speak their minds? Yes, but should people be saying what, there's got to be a limit to, so it's really crazy, I think, but it's just the way our society is at the moment. It's like a free-for-all. But I think there's good people, and then there's people that want to have things happen. And when I was doing one investigation, there was a woman speaking, and we were recording everything, and she was trying to communicate with spirit, and so she started to talk, and then at one point she asked a question, and then she lowered her voice and she said, "Yeah." And then my buddy said, "Hey, look, we got an EVP. Let me hear it." And I said, "No, that was her." But he thought that the change in voice was an answer to the question. So there's a lot of projection, too, where people want things to be that aren't. And I think that's part of it. They want it so bad. I was big into genealogy for a long time, doing my family history, and I found a lot of errors in genealogy out there, too, because people do the same thing. It's like a crossword puzzle, If you find the right name or the right name with the right year, you don't realize there might be somebody else with the same name or the same year. And people just plug it in instead of really verifying it. So I think that's part of the problem, too. People want the credit for finding something, so they'll make stuff up in order to do it, instead of taking the time to really go over it.
So do you believe, then, that there is truly an oversaturation of paranormal teams out there because of the popularity thanks to TV? Or do you think that it's just not the right combination of people having an understanding of what they're even supposed to investigate?
Well, I'm not sure, because I don't know each group of people, but I think that I see lots. There's a ton of groups. There's more and more groups, and I'm all open for it, because if somebody can find something and it can really stick, that's wonderful. But I think where it's complicated is if you look at the parapsychologists that have been trained and what they do and how they look at things, it's not so clear-cut, because there can be telekinetic things going on, there can be telepathy going on, you can be reading history instead of you could be seeing something that already happened and somehow it's manifesting again and you're just seeing the memory of it. It's not so black and white, even when you do find evidence. So I'm not sure. I think, there's a lot of different types of people, and I guess it's like anything else. What are you in it for? What are you doing what you're doing for? You know what I mean? That's part of the issue, is like, why do people do this? Why are they doing that? And some of them, I'm sure, have very healthy reasons, and then there's others that maybe it's attention-seeking or something like that, and if that's the case, that's not so good. But that's true of everything. It's not just paranormal, it's everything in life.
I would agree with you on that. I think the biggest issue is we only have about 2.5 minutes before we're going to go to our first break of the night. I think one of the biggest issues that we have in the paranormal field is, educated or not, I think we have a lot of brilliant people doing some fantastic research and development, especially in the technology. However, without an actual understanding of what anybody is trying to accomplish, I think that's the biggest flaw that we have in any type of research that we're doing. What would you say to that?
No, I agree, because I agree with the equipment stuff. I've tried some of that stuff, and then I think to myself, okay, what just happened? Like I tell you with the spirit box, what just happened? We've got a random word to answer my question, but what happened? What was that? How do I explain that? All that stuff. It's like a lot of people are using things and they're not really clear on what they're using, even how it really actually works. And you're right. People are just doing it. I think it's like they're doing it just to do it. But the point is, I think it has to be clearer on why they're doing it. To me, I want my work is to hope to open up the psychological field to be more open to these experiences, especially on the subjective level in like psychology and in therapy, and acknowledge people's experiences and be able to make a distinction between those that are real and those that aren't, and have more respect for it, more openness toward it. That's one of the goals I've been trying to do, and the other one is to evolve. To evolve. I think we evolve as we grow and we can perceive more. I think it's all my theory in hypnosis is actually different than anyone else's because I focus on what I consider differentiation and being able to perceive more accurately as the goal of understanding hypnosis and the paranormal and those other things. And one of the questions is, why can someone see something someone else can't? And how do we go about making it so we can see that better or more clearly? Or how do we differentiate more, which means perceive, but not just with your eyes, with your whole being? I mean, there's some people that experience things, they don't see it, but they feel it. They feel like someone could feel a person with a leather coat on, not see it at all, but just know that's what's going on. There's a person here with a leather coat on, but they don't see it. They feel it. And how do people perceive things and other people don't? You know, that's a big question, too, that I don't think a lot of people have an answer to.
Dr. Woodard, we are going to hop out for our first break of the night here, and I would love to continue this right after the break. And we do have some questions from our audience starting to pile up here. And during this show, we love to get our audience involved. This show isn't about me, it's about them. So we will get to their questions as well. Dr. Fredrick Woodard is our guest tonight on Spaced Out Radio. His book, you can pick it up at any major bookstore. You can pick it up also online at Amazon, Barnes & Noble. It's called Perceptual Hypnosis, A Spiritual Journey Towards Expanding Awareness. Highly suggest you pick it up. Once again, we will be right back with more Spaced Out Radio right after this.
365 days a year, we're in the field, investigating UFO sightings, talking to alien abductees, and visiting secret military locations like Area 51. We're UFO Seekers, official partner of Spaced Out Radio. Follow our daily search for the truth at ufoseekers.com or like us on social media. Catch us on Spaced Out Radio every third Monday of the month as we discuss Area 51, UFOs, and more. And also, don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube.
From coast to coast to coast, Blacklight Uncharted is taking on the paranormal across Canada. From ghostly hauntings to the UFOs flying above in conjunction with MUFON Canada, we're closely investigating what's going on in the northern skies and checking out the apparitions that walk among us. Check out our videos right here at spacedoutradio.com. We want to know your thoughts, we want to hear your experiences, and we want you to share your stories. The answers are out there, and we intend to find them.
Would you like to become one of our space travelers? All you have to do is click on the Space Travelers icon at spacedoutradio.com. For only $5 a month, you can get access to some great prizes, as well as private monthly shows, newsletters, and a members-only section on our website. Become a space traveler today.
It's paranormal news at its finest. Welcome to The Encounter. At spacedoutradio.com, The Encounter online is SOR's trusted news source for everything weird and strange going on around the world. This is news editor Eric Markham. Our team of journalists are scouring the planet for those strange stories that rarely make the mainstream. No fear-mongering or fake news here. Head over to spacedoutradio.com and encounter The Encounter.
Want to learn more about aliens, cover-ups, conspiracies, cryptids, and the paranormal? All you have to do is tune in S4 as we take over the Spaced Out Radio night, starting at midnight Pacific, 3 a.m. Eastern, each and every Saturday night, right after Spaced Out Saturdays. Hi there, this is Eric Cooper from Forest Moon Paranormal. Join me, Corey Ruiz, and friends as we discuss the hot topics of the night. It's fun, entertaining, and as dark as the night. Find us at spacedoutradio.com.
Hey, this is Canadian Paranormal Investigator Mike Moore. The third Wednesday of every month, I'll be teaming up with Dave Scott to bring you Ghosts of the Great White North. Each month, we will bring on guests from across Canada to discuss their ghostly encounters. Canada is a paranormal hotbed with stories you've never heard, so we're going to bring them to you. So get comfy on your Chesterfield, grab a donut, and join us, eh?
Are you an experiencer? Have you had run-ins with strange creatures you can't explain? ETs, Dogman, Bigfoot, werewolves? They're enough to scare the daylights out of anyone. Hi there, I'm Butch Witkowski from your Four Cop. And on the last Monday of every month, you can listen to me and the host, Dave Scott, talk about the weird and the strange being reported on Spaced Out Radio. I'm going to bring my investigations and sources, you bring your experiences, and we'll figure out the rest together. Strange Days on Spaced Out Radio. Come tune us in at spacedoutradio.com.
Want a place to share your experiences without feeling judged? We have the place for you. If you've experienced sightings or contact with ETs, ghosts, cryptids, or UFOs, and you'd like someone to confidentially look into the matter, just fill out an SOR Sightlines report. Our goal is to help you get the answers you need to the experiences you've had with our professional team of researchers. Your information stays 100% confidential. The SOR Sightlines report. Fill out your experience today only at spacedoutradio.com.
Psychic Sundays, spiritual communication, ET contact, Sasquatch in your backyard. We will have it all on Cosmic Passport with me, Elizabeth Anglin. Each Sunday, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, at spacedoutradio.com, I will take you on a journey of enlightenment. The goal is learning from the soul on out. We'd love it if you joined our experience. Cosmic Passport, heard Sundays at spacedoutradio.com.
Are you interested in advertising on Spaced Out Radio? Head to our website at spacedoutradio.com and click on our advertising tab. There, you will find an assortment of ways you can get your product out there with us, from radio commercials to banners and social media. Have a product you like our hosts to endorse? We can do that too. Visit spacedoutradio.com for more details.
From British Columbia to Northern California, Pacific North Weird has Cascadia covered. Check out our feature videos at spacedoutradio.com, where I, Vincent Zunza, and my super sleuth partner Alexandra Sullivan track down the weird and strange stories from around the Pacific Northwest, from Bigfoot to Mel's Hole and everything in between. This is what makes life exciting. So why report the normal when we can report the Pacific North Weird right here at spacedoutradio.com.
Don't have time to listen to Spaced Out Radio live? Wherever you are, the car, the office, the shower, or even if you're traveling, we're right here for you. Each Spaced Out Radio show can be found on iTunes, TuneIn, and on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. It's the perfect way for you to catch up on our shows. For more information, just head over to our website, spacedoutradio.com, and tune in to us today.
Welcome to Spaced Out Saturdays with me, Dave Cruz from Beyond the Strange. Our weekly feature on spacedoutradio.com will take you around the world discussing everything from the paranormal to the latest conspiracies from the top guests in their fields. We won't leave any story uncovered. Spaced Out Saturdays at spacedoutradio.com starting 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern.
The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. Would you like to connect with us? Head to spacedoutradio.com for all your latest show info. And hit us up on Twitter using the hashtag SpacedOutRadio. Now, back to Dave Scott and SOR.
Welcome back to the second hour of Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott. Good to have you with us. Tomorrow night and Sunday, Dave Cruz is in for Spaced Out Saturdays, Elizabeth Anglin for Spaced Out Sundays, as we kick off another great weekend of 7-day-a-week programming. Everything starts at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time at spacedoutradio.com. We want to welcome in everyone listening in WQEE 99 Rock the Key down in Noonan, Georgia, home of The Walking Dead. Hope you're enjoying your nighttime entertainment with us. We're also live on the United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM in New Orleans and over 160 countries around the world. We're live on KTLK, The Fringe FM, Renegade Talk Radio out of Vegas, and if you're listening in on Revolution Radio, remember the Double R Machine is a donation station financed by you, the valued listener. Head on over to freedomslips.com and donate today. Bill Cardwell has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Viginti Quintuple. Viginti Quintuple is your password. Make sure you use it wisely, space travelers, as Bill sets a password each and every night right here on the mighty SOR. Now, if you want to follow us on social media, you can do so on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio. Use the hashtag Spaced Out Radio if you want to connect with me live during the show as well. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. Find me on Instagram, Dave Scott, SOR. You can listen to us on iHeartRadio in the United States. Tune in. You can click subscribe on iTunes to follow our podcasts, and on TalkStream Live as well. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including joining the SOR Space Travelers Club for $5 a month, shop at our Spaced Out Radio store, watch Contact TV or UFO Seekers videos. You can also crank up the Bumblefoot, and so much more. Everything is at spacedoutradio.com. Tonight we have Dr. Fredrick Woodard on the show. His book, Perceptual Hypnosis, A Spiritual Journey Towards Expanding Awareness, can be found at any major bookstore and online. We're talking the paranormal tonight. Dr. Woodard, welcome back.
Thank you.
Now, right before the break, we were talking about what we have to do to get this field of study a little bit more into the mainstream. And there's a lot of variables that obviously go through that. One of those is personal validation versus what society deems as norm.
Right,
Define that difference.
Well, what I do realize when we were talking earlier is that, you know, there's two ideas. One is what actually works under the scientific method, which, by the way, was discovered in a dream. Descartes had a dream that gave him the scientific method. And that's like more of consensus with society. That's harder. But then there's personal validation. You just know that was real. And you can't explain it. You can't share it with someone. But for you, it was real, and it validates you. And the experience is a positive effect on you, even if it's negative in the sense that, well, it doesn't fit everything else. What's the problem? What's going on here? But it actually was helpful to you. I think personal validation is important too. You know, and I'm not denying that when I say it doesn't meet the standards for science at times. It doesn't mean it's not valid or real. It's just it's very hard to get groups of people to validate something. At this point, we need a change in our paradigm. That's another thing. We need a new method, and that's very difficult. We have to create a new way of understanding experience. And I use qualitative research, and that's how I've done it. And qualitative research is very time-consuming and a burden, and most people want to do things quick and fast. So that's another problem. But that's my answer. I know it's not clear, but that's the best I can offer on that idea, on those ideas.
Do you think mainstream science would take us more seriously in this field if teams were following some sort of regulated code of conduct rather than the anarchic way everyone investigates?
Possibly, but I mean, the idea is that if you had a valid case and valid information, I think people wouldn't have any choice but to accept it if it was collected the right way. And you know, it's sort of like if someone from another planet lands on Earth and starts talking to everybody. There's crowds of people around. They take pictures. We can't deny that that's real. But as long as it's all secretive and, you know, not everybody sees it, it's hard to know whether it's real or not. You know.
So where does that start then? Because, for instance, science doesn't accept psychic phenomena for the most part.
Well, it does, actually.
Does it? Okay.
There's been proof that there's telepathy. There's been proof that there's... Dr. Ryan in North Carolina did a lot of studies that actually proved that it was beyond chance. So there's a lot of literature in the parapsychological field that has proved that psychic phenomena is real. So that's the funny thing, but it hasn't moved out of that arena to the other areas. But there is plenty of research that has proven cases and studies that have been done.
So I'm curious your opinion then in regards to what should be the ultimate goal for paranormal research. Is it solving the mystery of life after death? Is it solving the mystery as to why spirits still roam around here? What would be your definition of what the goal should be?
I'm not sure. It depends on the situation. I mean, my goals, what I do is I try to just take the experience and find the meaning in the experience, but that's the kind of work that I do. I guess you'd have to fit the purpose to the situation. You know, it could just be helping that family out. If you're going to someone's house and there's disturbances, helping them, stop those disturbances or be okay in the situation. I guess each time it could be different. You know, it's just hard. Proving life after death could be one goal, but that would depend on the case, I guess. Reincarnation, I mean, we've had some incredible studies on reincarnation with children, with Ian Stevenson and Tucker and other people. So there's a lot of really valuable work out there.
In your opinion, then, and maybe I'm putting you on the spot here, and please, I'll go all Canadian here and apologize if you feel I am. But what do you think that the do's and don'ts of the paranormal equate to, then? If we can break down the do's first, what should people be doing?
Well, the way the evidence is collected, that's important. I mean, how people go about that's really important. But I am not an expert in the technology field, and taking. I've heard things from people that have shown me things, like one of the guys that does research with me. He went into a graveyard, and he's got an EVP that the person's actually saying that they're so and so, but there was no one there but him. And so you wonder, how did that happen? That's what he said, but it's only his word, and he's got no witnesses, and that's another problem. And a lot of times when a team goes, what's their goal? Their goal is to achieve that, and that's the team that's there. So it's like there has to be, I think the best way is having a handful of professionals in different types of fields together that, cover the full gamut of everything, where it's very difficult because it has to go through the scientific method to be acknowledged by science. And you can't do these things in labs because this isn't a lab-type situation, so that makes it harder. But I don't know. It depends on the situation, really.
What about the don'ts? What are you seeing on the negative of the paranormal side that you would like to see people stop doing?
Well, the don'ts, I think, are the ones I've seen are, one of the problems is people project. And what I mean by project, you see what you want to see. We all have that problem. We can have that problem. And you've got to really look at your projections. You want something to happen. Did it really happen, or did you believe it happened? That's one of the problems, I think. I remember looking at some films, and it looked like there was a ghost in the film, and it was not a film, it was a picture, an old picture in a genealogy library from back in the day. But literally, all that was the shadow that came out on a flutter on the camera, and it wasn't actually something real. And people see what they want to see. I've had people show me stuff that it's what they want to see, but it's not really what they're saying it is. And that's the hard part, because each person has to learn how to do that for themselves. I think that's the biggest weakness I've seen, but I don't, I don't cover everything.
What about hoarding of evidence?
Well, see, I think that's how the evidence is collected is the big issue. And then sharing that evidence, just how far does that go? I mean, if you put that in like a big university lab where they have $1 million equipment, they can pretty much determine whether that was a human voice or not, I guess. And you're buying equipment for a couple $100, and then you have $1 million equipment analyzing it. It's like, what do you know, what? That's the point. You have to really be clear on the collection. I noticed another thing that happened when I was I was down at a cemetery that's really known for being haunted, and we were there during the late afternoon, and I heard these girls. It sounded like teenage girls laughing, and there was nothing around, and it was on the recorder, and I'm looking around. I couldn't see them, and my buddy's looking around, and later he goes, "Oh, we got an EVP," and I said, "Well, we got to cruise around the area." Well, not too far away was a path to a lake that people walked all the time, and I assume the voice just carried. But you got to be able to eliminate that stuff too. You know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean in regards to that. I think my biggest disappointment in the paranormal field is the fact that we have too many people out there for themselves trying for the thrill-seeking rather than trying to collect actual research. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. That's what I think you mean, and I mean by what are you doing it for? I mean, it's like if it's, you know, I compare it to the genealogy thing where people were just in a hurry to make a connection so they could be the one, and they make the wrong connection. And they don't research the evidence enough to get the correct answers, and then they publish something that's not true. And, you know, and then that affects everybody because a bunch of other people start copying their work, and then before you know it, everybody thinks they're related to somebody they're not related to. But I think it's important for people to be doing it for the right reasons. But again, it's not just the paranormal; it's in everything. People are in all kinds of fields for the wrong reasons, and doing all kinds of things for the wrong and right reasons. And the people that excel are the people that really care about people, and they're doing it to help people, to make the world a better place. I mean, if we can prove that there's life after death, then, you know, maybe people will, you know, change, be a little more cautious about how they're treating other people, and that would be a good thing. You know, even if there isn't life after death, treating people right, I think, is important, but it doesn't always happen, and there's some people that can do that, and there's some people that can't, and it's just, I think that's what we're doing by evolving. When I mean evolving, the people are evolving at different levels. But yes, you're right. There's some people that aren't doing it for the right reasons, and then there's the people that, you know, try to make up information and the hoaxes, and that's sad because that puts a bad rap on everybody else.
Go ahead, please. Sorry.
And I think in some of my research, and I don't mean research in my research with clients and people, living people, but in reading old material, there were some gifted mediums and stuff that were being studied, and on occasion they'd try to fake it because they couldn't make it happen every time, and then they get caught faking it, and then people want to throw the whole thing out now. And, you know, that's bad. That's too bad, but that's happened too.
Let's get to some audience questions here, if you don't mind, because we always like to include them. Let's go to Alan's question. Alan is asking, do you think it takes a spiritual person to be successful in paranormal investigation, as well as alien contact?
No, I don't think they'd have to be spiritual. I think that an open-minded person that's investigating, if they're looking for the truth, finding the truth's the same. It's self-evident, the truth, when it's found. When it's real truth, it speaks for itself, and anyone can find that. And I don't think education in itself is the answer either, because some people that are educated don't have a clue, and there's some people that have no education and they're incredibly gifted. So I don't always say that's the bar. It's the individual, their ability to open up and have those characteristics of having empathy for someone else, being able to identify with someone else, being able to see what's in front of them. So,
let's get to another question here. This one comes from Shar, and she is asking, can spirits hypnotize you, or can you hypnotize someone you don't see?
Can you hypnotize someone you don't see?
Sorry, I got confused there. I had to sneeze. I'm not going to lie.
Oh, no problem.
I had to sneeze. Let me rephrase the question here. She's saying, can spirits hypnotize you, or can you hypnotize someone not to see you?
Not to see you. Well, they call that in hypnosis a negative hallucination, meaning that you don't. A positive hallucination would be you see something that's not there. You can create it. A negative hallucination is to remove something that is there, and I would say that at some level you know it's there, but you could create something that's not there and believe you're perceiving it. But I don't think spirits can do that, but they can try to, I believe things can try to trick you, but I don't think they can hypnotize you. It's hypnosis is really, all hypnosis is self-hypnosis, really.
Let's go on to Robin's question here. He is saying, do you think there are no haunted houses, just people? He thinks the latter if multiple people have the same experience or similar.
That there's no haunted houses?
Right.
I would say I'm not sure about that. I have experienced that I believe there is something more going on, but I can't say what it is exactly. I just know there's something more than what we're taught going on, but how do we capture understanding it? That's the difficult part. But I wouldn't say there isn't or there is. I'm not sure what's happening.
Let's get to another question here. This one comes from Bob. He's saying, Doc, what do you think about sensory deprivation tanks, like in the movie Altered States? Do they have any benefits for people with psychological or maybe spiritual problems?
Sensory deprivation tanks have been used to help people, open up, but I haven't worked with them myself. There are people that have. They do help people kind of have experiences because it takes away all the outside stimulation. I'm not sure it would be a good thing for someone that's having problems, though. I think it would be better to work with someone that's an expert in their areas of their problematic areas and take it from there.
Let's get to another question. This one from Craig. Craig is asking, have you done any research on why hypnosis doesn't work on everyone?
Well, one of the things I happen to know from doing my research, I did a 40-something page paper on the subjective experiences of people being hypnotized and doing hypnosis to them. I interviewed psychologists that had hypnotized people, and I interviewed clients that had the experience. And one of the things is that, first off, people that can't be hypnotized are always thinking. They can't quiet their mind. They can't go with the flow because, like I said, it's all self-hypnosis. It's not anyone doing anything to you. You have to learn to take control of your mind instead of be controlled by your mind. It's sort of like we don't really have control over our own minds. It takes practice, and people gain control over their minds through meditation and self-hypnosis and therapy and things like that. Well, hypnosis with someone to learn how to do it. But usually the people that can't be hypnotized are they're either thinking someone's doing something to them and they're not going to let them, which isn't really the case, or their mind is too busy. They can't quiet their mind. The thoughts are interfering and they just can't relax or quiet to actually follow the guidelines that would help them get there. That's been my experience with it.
All right, let's move on to Heather's question here. Why do some see full form apparitions and make connections, and until you remind them, and yes, it is proof, they apparently have electrical things to communicate with you? Okay, Heather, that doesn't really make sense. I'm going to just cut that in half and say, why do some people see full forms and make connections easily, yet others struggle with that?
Well, that's that whole point that I am exploring, which I call differentiation. Some people can see things, other people can't. Why is that? That is an interesting question. I would say that either if those things they're seeing aren't like projections created by their mind and they're real, then that would mean that they have some ability to go beyond what everyone else can see, to open up more. And that is an intriguing area. As far as electricity goes, I did interview someone once who had all those issues, and although I can't prove that what she said was true, that everywhere she went there was electrical problems and this and that. The funny thing was, after she left my office, my tape recorder went, my phone went. I had to replace all the appliances in my office, and that was, I thought, kind of funny, because, you know, that was like really happened. And so, no one else came in and did that, and she talked about how that was a problem for her wherever she went, and it obviously took place in my office. But, you know, again, it's just a subjective experience. There was no other witnesses. It wasn't controlled, a controlled study where she went into a lab and they had it all controlled. But so I think those things are real. Capturing them and understanding them, that's another thing. Mm-hmm. I mean, we don't even know what electricity is. Isn't that funny?
It is kind of odd. I guess so.
We use it, and we pay for it, and it's being used to light the houses and power things, but we don't really understand it.
That's why I got my degree in journalism, boss. Mathematics and science were not old Davy's thing, so I did know how to talk, so that's why I went into journalism. But let's I want to get to a follow-up question from Heather, who is asking then, Doctor, have you yourself ever seen a full-body apparition?
No, I haven't. I have not, no.
Is it on the bucket list?
Yes.
I've
seen things under meditation, and I've seen things in dreams, but not while I was awake.
I have a ghost in my backyard, or that patrols my yard. When we moved here just over 2 years ago, I saw him on day one when we were moving in. I saw this blurry figure walk right by my U-Haul truck, or towards it. And then a few days later, a couple weeks later, previous to that, we were having a bear come into our carport and play with our garbage can, because I live in the middle of nowhere. And so during the break, it was during the Perseid meteor shower, I went outside to look at the meteors during one of our show breaks, actually the first one, and in my backyard, very close to where my door is to my carport, I have a tree that's about 20 feet tall. And standing right in front of this tree was a gentleman with a white t-shirt and very light-colored blue jeans and white running shoes on. And I watched him disappear in front of me. I happened to have a psychic lady named Angela Dixon out of New York on. We were talking about psychic dreaming and dream evaluation. And all of a sudden, lo and behold, Angie connects up with this gentleman who is named Rick. And after the show, we started talking. You know, Rick's in my backyard. I'm in the studio. Angie is in New York, and we're chatting away. And I asked Rick if he wanted to move on to the light. He's like, he would prefer not. He really likes our yard. He likes the yard. He likes hanging out here. So I said, okay, fine. And he said, don't worry. I never come inside. I said, no problem. No problem. I said, but can I ask a favor? And he goes, sure. I said, we got the little guy here. And our son was only 2.5, turning 3 at the time. I said, I really, really do not want him getting in any troubles with bears or cougars, right? Because we do have bears and cougars. And he said, not a problem. Not a problem. So the one time we have seen a bear, or my wife has seen a bear in our yard, this bear came over the neighbor's fence into our yard. And this bear, she said, did a double take looking around and absolutely beelined it as fast as it possibly could to get out of our yard. Something spooked it. And I can tell you right now, it was not our dogs. And since then, I have never had my garbage cans knocked over. Including, Doc, I have to add this as a caveat. During the evacuation, all the wild animals moved into our area. And apparently, my neighbor Tony, who was a firefighter fighting the blazes here, you know, he was driving by the street. He saw this massive, biggest black bear he's ever seen coming across his lawn. And anyhow, Tony's like, dude, watch your garbage can. This is a big, big boy. I'm like, yeah, no problem. So I go, because the first day we got home, we had to clean out our fridge to see if our fridge was okay, because they shut all the power down in my area for 4 days. And so all our food and everything was rotten, and, so I'm hauling it out in garbage bags. Thank goodness my fridge and freezer survived, being out that long,
Right.
But threw out all the food, and I throw it into the garbage can, and I said, Rick, I need your help. I said, there's a big black bear around here. You've probably seen him. I don't want him getting into this garbage. This is one mess I don't want to clean up. If you don't mind watching the garbage can. 2 nights later, my wife is putting our little guy to bed, and his bedroom window is in the front of the house. And she looks out the house, and she calls me up, and she's like, Dave? I said, yeah. She goes, did you know that there is a shadow of a man standing between your vehicle and the garbage can? I said, good. She's like, what do you mean, good? I said, well, that's Rick. I said, I asked him to watch over the garbage can so the big black bear didn't come. And my garbage was safe in there for 6 days before the garbage man came. 6 days. So I am a firm believer in the whole spirit thing.
Well, that's very good.
Yes. I just thought I would share that with you. I'm a little long-winded, but...
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Kind of synchronistic, too.
Yeah. Let's get to another question here. This one from Robin. He says, I have epilepsy, and as a ghost hunter, do you think I can see things that really aren't there?
Well, I can't really answer that. He could. It's like everyone else. It's no different. It's how do you prove that for someone else? I mean, I had a friend of mine, I think I told you earlier when I was talking about how the lights were going off and the TV was going off and the CD player opened up and my friend had died. When I saw her 2 weeks before that, she was seeing angels. She said, there's an angel right there, see it? And I said, no, I can't see it. She said, there's one over there, too. And I was like, wow, if she, people usually throughout history have talked about seeing angels when they're getting ready to die, and she did die 2 weeks later, and I didn't see them, but that doesn't mean she didn't. I can't say that, I can't say he could or couldn't see something. I wouldn't want to do that.
A lot of psychic people believe, Dr. Woodard, that everyone has the ability to see if they can open themselves out. Do you buy that?
I'm not sure. I think that most people can, but I don't know if everyone can. That would depend on a number of things that we don't completely know, and that would be that we're all the same, that we all evolved the same, and we're all connected in certain ways, and we may or may not be. And I don't know all those answers, but I do think that people have the ability. They don't always know they have the ability, even though for example, I knew a guy that was very into all this and didn't believe in all this stuff, and yet he showed up in a parking lot in a crucial moment when his wife needed him and didn't know why. He went there. But he didn't believe in like paranormal stuff or anything, but I think at some level he knew what was going on. And I think one of the big themes I talk about a lot I mention it in my book, is the difference between intuition and fear. Fear is something that we do because we're afraid, where intuition is just you just know. It's not fear. It's just you know. If you're afraid there's a bear in your backyard, like you were saying, let's say not you, but someone else, and they're fearful and there's no bear there, that's fear. But if they suddenly know there's a bear there and there is a bear there, that's intuition. We want to nurture our intuition, but we want to remove our fear. And, removing fear doesn't mean blindly removing respect for moments when you shouldn't do something.
Do you believe then that the paranormal is everywhere?
Well, it depends on what you mean by the paranormal, I guess.
Well, let's say ghosts, spirits.
I believe they could be. If they exist, then yes. I mean, I would say that, something oversees what's going on. I don't know quite how. I don't know why things happen the way they do, but lots of my clients have told me different stories that really make you realize that there's something going on. Those things just don't happen for no reason at all, and they really do kind of point out that there's something going on more than we realize or we understand. And but exactly, I mean, maybe there's nothing right in my room right now or in my building right now. There might not be. They might be somewhere else, or maybe there's things that can see into the building from wherever they are, or maybe there's other dimensions. There's so many possibilities on what's going on. Maybe we can't identify things because they slip into other dimensions and they're not really in our dimension, or they're at a frequency we can't measure, and there's so many possibilities. It's hard to answer, at least from my perspective. I'm only trying to handle one aspect of things. I'm not an expert on every aspect of it. It's just like I said, a lot of the stories make me believe. There was a story of a woman one time, they couldn't find the will for their family, and she went to lay down to go to bed, and when she went to lay down to go to bed, she saw her father at the foot of the bed, and she smelled his scar, and he told her to go over to the house and lift up the rug, and there was a loose board under the desk, and her and her sister went over there, and sure enough, that's where it was, and they found the will. It was physical evidence. What information she was given was true. Some, like parapsychologists, could argue that at some level her mind did clairvoyance and knew where it was and found it, which is still a paranormal ability, but just a different one. Like maybe it wasn't, she made up her father in order to make the information more acceptable to herself. That's where one of the problems is intellectually with how do you get the information? How does the information come?
I love the way you think, because you're making me think tonight. You just take it to that whole different level for us, Dr. Woodard. Thank you.
Well, I try to understand the truth, and like I said, self-evident stuff. There's some stuff it's just self-evident. You just know. No one else needs to know. It's just for you. And there are stories that you can't really share because they're so personal and they're so private, and yet you got to respect them, and they're people's experiences.
Mm-hmm. No, I fully agree with you. Let's get to a question from Alan here. And Alan is asking, do we all have a pineal gland, the source of abilities, in your opinion?
Well, I'm not a medical doctor, and I did hear about how some people believe that's the source of some of our abilities. I really don't know that aspect of it. I couldn't answer that. That's I've heard that, but I don't know for sure where our abilities are from. What part of our brain or our soul, whether it's our body or our mind or our soul that's doing this. I mean, if you leave your body and you still see things the way you see with your eyes, and it's not a fantasy or an illusion, then what's seeing? Your eyes or your soul? I don't know.
Or the mysterious third eye.
Yes.
Yes, that damn third eye that's always closed on some of us, but that's another topic, another time. When you are personally investigating paranormal, tell us your best ghost story that you have so far.
Well, it's probably not a ghost story. It's probably the most interesting situation that I remember that sticks out in my mind right at this moment. Was I interviewed a woman who, she hugged her friend and instantly knew that her friend's husband was going to kill her. And she didn't say anything because she thought that was crazy. She didn't think that way, and she didn't believe those things would happen. And her friend was divorcing and saying everything was okay, and then 2 weeks later, her husband killed her. and she was freaked out that she even had that thought. And so that's the whole question of telepathy or, precognition. And she really, she was honest. She shared it. It's, she allowed me to talk about it, but not her name. And it really bothered her. And that was probably one of the most, I could imagine being in her position where you don't want to say that to somebody. Make them, think you're crazy, but then it happens, and that was probably the most, one of the most difficult stories I heard.
That is horrible. I'm
Right.
sorry. I'm sorry for her.
Right. Yes, I know. But sometimes they're not always pleasant, the knowledge we get. And then there's the whole idea of, precognition. You see something that's going to happen, and then you can't do anything about it. Or can you do something about it, that whole question? Or is it really meant to happen, or could you change it, That whole thing.
And how do you really convince somebody that that's an event that's actually going to happen? It's much like you hear all of these people say, intuitively they knew 9/11 was going to happen.
Right.
You just can't convince people.
Well, there was an interesting case that I put in my book that was an English housewife in England, and this was documented in a parapsychological journal. There is literature out there, scientific literature that has validated things, and like the Journal of Parapsychology, and there's a lot of legitimate research already done. Well, this woman, she saw while she was meditating an attack in the 70s on Israel during, I think it was the Olympics, I can't remember exactly, but she sent a letter to Golden Meir describing what she saw. And her letter, they proved she had no connection to anybody, but her letter allowed Israel and the United States to stop a terrorist attack. They caught them entering the shore from her experience.
Really?
It was a real story and documented. And so, there's some incredible stuff out there, really.
Do you think that the government, and I'm not trying to get all conspiracy theory here, but do you think they take psychic phenomena a lot more serious than, say, today's medical doctors or even police forces when things are going to happen?
I don't know. I haven't had much experience with that. I think that police departments, if they run out of, if they've used all their resources with all their talent and they still can't do it, they're open to get information to help them, to help. And on an occasion, it has helped. And that's a wonderful thing. The government, I haven't really looked into all of that. I know that they did the remote viewing stuff, and there were people that wrote books on that experience, and so I think the government has studied it. I know, that they've done that, but I don't know what the results were. I don't have any of that. I don't have any access to that information.
It would be interesting to know because, let's face it, they did try remote viewing. They did try astral traveling, psychic phenomena. And, coinciding with what you just said about this lady having that premonition and the government taking it very seriously, I know a lot of my own psychic friends who've gone to police stations and said, look, I know you're looking for this person. You need to look right here. And the police have blown that person off. In the meantime, that's exactly where they find the body or something along those lines. You know what I'm saying?
Right. It's a very individual thing because it's like there are police departments, and I'm sure there's officers, detectives, and chiefs that are very open to look into anything just because it's worth looking into, as long as it's not disrupting individuals with, in a way they like going in. You need a search warrant. You're going to get a search warrant based on somebody saying that you can't do that. But there are other people that are very closed-minded and they won't do it unless they have solid evidence.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, it's just like I said, it's like that in everything. But there have been some positive experiences. I've read about, where I haven't experienced personally, but where the psychics have helped the police, find information. So,
do you believe then in intuition? Because there's a lot of people out there who claim they're psychic, but they just read people very well.
Well, it depends on what you're defining intuition as. I totally believe in intuition, and I think that intuition is incredible. I mean, I remember, there's been experiences in my life where people have just said things, or I've said things. They're little telepathic communications that you kind of, it's just synchronistic. It's just very synchronistic. You think about something, oh God, I was just talking about that, and like that guy I told you that went to the parking lot where his wife was, and he didn't know why, and she'd never been there. So, and then there she is. It's like, that's intuition, I believe. But how do we? I know I read somewhere. I had read a study where they said that that the plane crashes, there were more people, statistically significantly, those planes had less people on them than other planes, as if people just didn't go on the plane, some of them, because of that. I read that somewhere, but whether that's true or not, every piece of research you're trusting in the other person's knowledge, and that's may or may not be true. I mean, I didn't do that study myself, so. But I think intuition is real. I think sometimes it helps people. It's sort of like, if you, there's things you know not to do, and you protect yourself, and you don't know why, but you do.
Are you intuitive yourself?
I think sometimes. Depends on the situation. I mean, there are moments I feel like I connected very well to something I couldn't have known consciously, but whether I picked it up in other ways, like some people say, I wonder about that. Because you can pick up information on a lot of levels, and then, like I said, the parapsychologists talk about, well, whether you clairvoyantly picked it up, your consciousness reached out farther than where we are, and that's the whole idea of time and space, which both in the paranormal experiences, I wrote an article on spiritual experiences. It was published in a professional journal. It was I think 60-something pages, and I really got into the experiences of people. And then when I did the hypnosis article, the research on hypnosis, both of them, time and space seems to get very, confused. Like it's as if people can reach out beyond time and space, and the barriers change, it seems. Like if you can see something that's going to happen in the future, how did you do that? That woman that I talked about who had that thought, she didn't know that man. She'd never met him.
So do you believe there is a huge difference between having intuitive thoughts that project to come true compared to, say, being a psychic medium where the light switch is always on? Doesn't matter if it's day or night.
Well, you see, that's another whole area of development. That's like some people, I think. So I've met a couple people that were incredibly could give a lot of details, and then there's other people that are so vague you can pretty much fit anything you want into it, But people that are genuine, I mean, those are very interesting things. Where do they get that information? That's very, how do they get that information? That's where we, go past logic. It's like you're not supposed to be able to see things that aren't in your presence, and you're not supposed to know things that aren't in your view. But yet, some people seem to do that. And it's how do they get that information that violates time and space? It's very intriguing. And how do we do that? We don't really understand that from a scientific perspective, except for with the telepathic experiments and the experiments that were done that were validated for, like the Rhine did it in University of North Carolina and things like that. But they have proven that people have gone beyond statistical significance. So,
do you think there needs to be more study on the psychic phenomena, or do we have enough? Do you think it's fully been proven?
some stuff has been proven, but then, here's the funny thing, it just gets dismissed or ignored. It's not really, it still isn't, like it's not fully known throughout the field, like even in psychology where the parapsychological experiments have proven things. Not everybody's aware of that, and even when they are, they just dismiss it. So it's like, it's some stuff has been proven, I think, and some stuff hasn't. So I don't know. Mm-hmm. It's like I think we need more research. But then, another question that I have, which is probably not going to happen in my lifetime, but if we actually got to the point where we could prove spirits exist and we could measure them and identify them and follow them, what are we going to do? Cage them?
Sure.
I mean, that's the other thing. That's frightening to think. If we actually reach the point where we can do that, what will we do with that? If it's healthy, that's good. If it's not healthy, that can be bad.
I want to ask you this question in regards to what we're just talking about. If you go back biblically, we hear about prophets speaking about the future and what is going to come and what is going to happen. To me, a prophet is a psychic. And yet, religious people today say, stay away from psychics, they're evil. In your opinion, what would be the difference?
The definition of a true prophet is someone that's never wrong. I read that somewhere, and it made a lot of sense to me. A prophet, a truly gifted person wouldn't say anything that would not come true. Wouldn't say anything that would not be truth. Where I think a lot of the problem with a lot of the psychics is some of them are just, they're not fully accurate. They're not always right, and they're not always on target. Some of them are really, really helpful, and some of them aren't. But, I'm not an expert on mediums, so.
I know I put you on the spot with that one, boss. I know.
Oh, no problem. But I'm just saying, it's like that's not my expertise. But there are fraudulent people out there too, and that's harmful. That kind of wrecks it for someone that's genuine. But I think truth, it's like self-evident again. If somebody tells you something that's truthful, it's truthful. If it's not truthful, then why did they even say that? Why would you say something to somebody that would hurt them or misguide them? Money does
Maybe. A lot of things.
I know that's one of the big problems. That's one of the problems with what some of the aspect of some of the things you're talking about or questions you had. It's throughout the night. It's like, well, where's the funding for that? Who's going to pay for that? Why? No one wants to pay for it because what's it going to do for anybody?
True that. We only have about 3.5 minutes before we got to go to break here. Hard to believe that's through 2 hours already.
Yes.
Are you still having fun?
Oh, yes.
Let's get to a quick question here from Craig. And Craig is asking, do you find the more a person does hypnosis, the better they become, like the ability to access past lives at will?
Well, an interesting thing is my personal opinion on past lives is that it's in my book, kind of the idea that it's like a donut, and the hole in the center is the truth, and the donut is all the stuff you have to get through to get to the truth. I think that a lot of people have fantasies of their past lives, and that those fantasies are truthful of who they are and what they're struggling with. But the truth, you got to get through all kinds of things, beliefs, fantasies, what you've been taught, negative things, fears, before you can actually experience the truth. So I don't think automatically just because you see something under hypnosis that it's true. It can be true, it can be symbolically true, but if it's a long process to get to the truth sometimes, I think. And it takes work. I mean, I remember reading about an old writer in the 1800s, I believe it was Carrington, and he talked about how it took him months and months to automatic write. And there are people that just instantly do that, but they're really saying what they want. I remember when I was in undergrad and college, I heard about this incredible channeler who was supposed to be really good, and she was African American. And I wanted to go see her, and there was this woman that lived down near her, and she did astrology, and she said, "Hey, if you come down to my place," and she was like older, "and you come down to my place, and we can go to the channeler's house. I know where it is, right from my place, and I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll do a astrology thing for you, and we'll have dinner." And so I went down, and she printed out a printout of astrology for me, and then she proceeded to channel how we were going to have sex, which wasn't going to happen. I didn't want that with her, and I didn't feel that way. And so when we left her house to go to the channeler's meeting, I took a separate vehicle, my own, because I was leaving from there to go home. And when we walked into the house where the channeler was, the woman I was with walked up these stairs, and she shrieked and said, "Oh my God, a nail just went through my foot." And the channeler wheeled around and looked at her and said, "You're not supposed to use spiritual knowledge for your own personal gain." And then she looked over at me and she said, "That was for you to witness." And I thought, wow.
That's heavy.
Yeah, she was pretty gifted to know all that. Mm-hmm. And I was pretty impressed with her. With a lot of people, I'm not, but she and I realized that is you should not take advantage of people. It's like it'll come back on you taking advantage of people. So.
Absolutely, Doc. And we got to go to break here already. 2 hours complete. Cannot believe we're 2 hours in. We got 1 hour to go, and Dr. Fredrick Woodard is going the distance tonight on Spaced Out Radio. We appreciate him doing that for us. We're going to be talking more paranormal. We're going to see how hypnotherapy comes into play with the paranormal, if it does at all. The doctor will know. You can find his book on any major bookstore as well. Perceptual Hypnosis, A Spiritual Journey Toward Expanding Awareness. That is Dr. Fredrick J. Woodard. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio. I am your host, Dave Scott. We'll be back with the third and final hour right after this. Stay tuned.
We're getting strange on Saturday nights. Hi there, this is Dave Cruz, and each Saturday, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, I will take you on a tour of the weird and obtuse on Spaced Out Saturdays, from aliens to Sasquatch and every tinfoil hat in between. We got you covered. Join us at spacedoutradio.com for Spaced Out Saturdays. See you there.
Not ready for bed on Saturday night? Right after Spaced Out Saturdays, hop on over to S4 with Corey Ruiz and me, Eric Cooper from Forest Moon Paranormal. With S4, there are no limits to what we try and uncover. From government conspiracies to helping clean up the paranormal, no topic is safe on S4. We get to the heart of the matter, of the subjects you want to learn more about. So tune in on S4 starting at midnight Pacific, 3 a.m. Eastern, only on spacedoutradio.com.
Have you had an experience you can't explain? Would you like someone you can trust to look into it? We have just the place. The SOR Sightlines Report is the place for you to find answers. Whether it's Bigfoot, UFOs, Dogman, ghosts, aliens, or anything strange, the Sightlines Report will get you connected with one of our expert researchers to find out what's going on. All of your personal information is kept 100% confidential. The SOR Sightlines Report, a place for you to find the answers you need. Only at spacedoutradio.com.
Hi there. I'm Butch Witkowski, lead investigator with UFO Cop. On the final Monday of every month, you can listen to me and host Dave Scott on Spaced Out Radio's Strange Days. We're going to get to the heart of the matter when it comes to what's happening out there. People are seeing and experiencing things from ET contact to Bigfoot, and I want to hear about it. Your experiences are what we investigators need to help solve these unknown mysteries. So tune in at spacedoutradio.com to the final Monday of every month from Butch Witkowski's Strange Days.
This is Eric Markham, news editor for the Spaced Out Radio's The Encounter Online. We have put together a great team of writers and journalists from all over the world to bring you top-quality paranormal stories. From alien encounters to the latest conspiracies, you won't find any of that fake news here. True stories and top-notch reporting as we look to bring these experiences to the mainstream. The Encounter, online, only at spacedoutradio.com.
Do you want to know the truth? Do UFOs exist? Are aliens real? Are the governments hiding the biggest secret in history? We're UFO seekers, and we're on a hunt for the truth. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow along with us as we journey across the United States, visiting UFO hotspots and alien hotspots, trying to document the UFO phenomenon. Catch us on Spaced Out Radio every third Monday of the month as we discuss Area 51, UFOs, and more. And also, don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube.
Patrolling the Pacific Northwest, we are always on the lookout for the strange and unassuming stories that real people are experiencing. Hi, I'm Vincent Zunza from Pacific North Weird. Me and Alexandra Sullivan have teamed to bring to you those odd stories that never seem to make it into the mainstream. Stories so weird that will leave you scratching your head wondering, is this real? It's as real as it gets with Pacific North Weird. You can watch our videos right here at spacedoutradio.com.
Become more intimate and interactive with Spaced Out Radio. Join our Space Travelers Club with your new membership. For $5 a month, we'll provide you with special access to the website, monthly prize draws from books to psychic readings, along with monthly newsletter, private interviews, and more. Sign up today to be part of Spaced Out Radio's experience.
Looking for a place to advertise at a very reasonable cost? Look no further than Spaced Out Radio. SpacedOutRadio.com has an advertising tab that you can click to check out our daily, weekly, and monthly packages to play on the radio, or our website including social media. From commercial spots to banners, we have it all. Check out our competitive pricing today.
Don't have time to listen to Spaced Out Radio live? Wherever you are, the car, the office, the shower, or even if you're traveling, we're right here for you. Each Spaced Out Radio show can be found on iTunes, TuneIn, and on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. It's the perfect way for you to catch up on our shows. For more information, just head over to our website, spacedoutradio.com, and tune in to us today.
You hear footsteps in the empty room above you. A rocking chair begins rocking by itself. Don't be afraid of the things that go bump in the night. Reach for Spirit Storybox, the iPhone app the Huffington Post UK called the only ghost hunting app you will ever need. Spirit Storybox. The spirits are telling their stories. Are you listening?
Strange creatures lurking in the night, the sounds of wood knocking in the forest, odd happenings right out of a fictional world. These are the reports I love. Hi there, this is author Ronald Murphy, and I would love it if you join me and Spaced Out Radio host Dave Scott the second Wednesday of every month on our journey into the unknown land of cryptozoology at spacedoutradio.com. From Mothman to Frogman and everything in between. Hey, they don't call me the crypto guru for nothing.
It's Cosmic Sundays with me, Elizabeth Anglin, in Cosmic Passport. Let me take you down a 3-hour spiritual journey where we will get into everything from ET contact to Psychic Sundays. It's a journey of listening and learning together with some of the best professionals in their fields. You can tune in to Cosmic Passport at spacedoutradio.com every Sunday, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern.
The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio with Dave Scott. Follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and hashtag Spaced Out Radio, and on Facebook, Spaced Out Radio Show. Now, back to the program.
A child grew up too fast, went running wild. Now we don't know who to pray to
Welcome back to the final hour of Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott. Great to have you with us. Tomorrow night and Sunday, we got the weekend crew back. Spaced Out Saturdays with Dave Cruz gets going at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time tomorrow night. Then on Sunday, Elizabeth Anglin's Cosmic Passport on Spaced Out Sundays. Once again, 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time, both shows. New to our lineup and sounding great, so make sure you check them out. Everything at spacedoutradio.com. We want to welcome in everyone listening in at WQEE 99 Rock the Key down in Noonan, Georgia, home of The Walking Dead. We are live as well on the United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM in New Orleans, and over 160 countries around the world. Good to have you with us as well. We are also live on KTLK, The Fringe FM, Renegade Talk Radio out of Las Vegas, and if you're listening in on Revolution Radio, remember the Double R Machine is a donation station financed by you, the valued listener. Head on over to freedomslips.com and donate today. Bill Cardwell has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Viginti Quintuple. Viginti Quintuple. Viginti Quintuple is your password. Bill sets the password each and every night right here on the mighty SOR. Sometimes it's a tongue twister. I think I got this one, though. Yes, I'm fist pumping. I'll need a big mention for that, Bill. Now, if you're on social media, follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, and you can also connect with me live during the show by using the hashtag Spaced Out Radio as well. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. You can find me on Instagram, Dave Scott, SOR. Listen to us on iHeartRadio in the United States, TalkStream Live. You can also find us on TuneIn and subscribe to us on iTunes as well. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including joining the SOR Space Travelers Club for $5 a month. You can check out the Encounter online. You can also listen to some Bumblefoot. Yes, rock out to Mr. B. We do around here all the time, as you know. You can also check out UFO Seekers, Contact TV. Their videos are fantastic. And shop at our Spaced Out Radio store. Tonight, we are talking with Fredrick Woodard, and we are getting into hypnosis, how it ties into the paranormal. Dr. Woodard's book is on sale right now at any major bookstore and online. Dr. Woodard, welcome back.
Thank you.
How do you tie in the field of hypnosis when it comes to the paranormal?
Well, there's a number of different ways. One is to, like I have done a few hypnosis sessions with people that have been abducted, to recall the experience, to remember the experience. There's past life regression. There's an area I haven't done that much in, but I've read a lot about, which is possession and hypnosis. There's been people that have done possession work with hypnosis. There's a number of people that have done that. And there's a lot of literature about psychic development through self-hypnosis also. So those are areas that it has been helpful in. And there's a lot of different people that have done work. Like there's a Dr. Newton, I think, Michael Newton, I think that's his name, who's done actually hypnotized people in after they've died to remember stuff, passing into the other world, and has written what they've said about that. So there's a lot of different areas where hypnosis can be helpful, but it's got to be. It depends on the situation.
And what would that situation be in regards to this?
You don't need to do that for somebody that's just seeing an apparition and they're telling you about it. There's absolutely nothing to be gained there. But for people to develop their own abilities, or to work on remembering a past life, or if they had lost time trying to remember that. There's a controversy about some of the stuff, like whether people remember the truth or they make it up, and that's a difficult thing, because I think it can sometimes be both. And really, like I said, you have to get through the donut. You have to get through the difficult stuff to get to the truth, and it's not always as easy as it sounds. So those are areas where I think hypnosis has been very effective over time.
Do you prefer dealing with hypnosis when it comes to people who are struggling with their paranormal experiences, or those who maybe are dealing with ET contact or abduction?
I only use hypnosis when it's necessary. It's not always necessary. I mean, you don't need to hypnotize everybody that comes in or everybody that has an experience. It's an ET experience. If a person lost time, then that can be helpful sometimes. Sometimes they can't remember anything because there's nothing to remember, or they just don't have the memory. With people that have struggled with experiences they had, it's not always hypnosis that would help them. I mean, hypnosis can help with depression, it can help with anxiety, it can help people that have had traumas, but that's not necessarily paranormal.
Trust me, depression and anxiety go hand in hand with your host of the night. I make no bones about it. I do suffer from that. But I have noticed that since, in my own case, I never really noticed or was diagnosed with depression or anxiety until my own personal experiences started flaring up on a regular basis. Have you noticed that with a lot of patients?
Well, most of my patients are psychological. My research is with the paranormal, so I don't always have to do anything about that. They're usually just sharing their experiences with me. There's not that many people that struggle with the experience. It's just trying to understand it and share it. So I don't have a lot of clients that need that feel bad about their experiences.
How do you deal with people who are having alien contact?
I usually interview them on their experience, and then if there's missing time, we try to see if they can remember what happens. And I did have one client that I did we did an interview, and then I used that in my journal article. And then after the interview was over, we did some hypnosis, and she remembered a little more of the experience she had after that through the hypnosis. So it was helpful in her being able to understand the experience better.
Do you find that there is a correlation between people who have experiences with the paranormal and with ET contact, or do you think they're absolutely two totally separate entities altogether to investigate?
Well, the interesting thing is that is the area that I am interested in, is like what these experiences all share in common, and from a psychological perspective. And I do think that there are some parallels. There are people that have similar experiences in totally different areas, and you could almost just see it's almost like a theater stage, like Shakespeare, life's just a stage. It's like different experiences with the same basic circumstances, but the stage is a little different, but it's actually the same thing. So it is very interesting in that regard. There's some people that feel they've been communicating with their guides, and then there's other people that feel they were communicating with aliens, and the experience is pretty much very similar.
This leads into a question from Heather, which says, have you ever had clients who've been hurt by spirits or ghosts?
Yes, I have one or two people, but they weren't clients. They were research subjects who had their own therapists who were helping them work through those experiences, but they came to share their experience with me. And they had kind of worked it out, but it did bother them, the experience.
When people are attacked either by aliens or the paranormal, how does that affect people psychologically when they are going through something like that they can't control?
First first off, what you have is what we've been talking about all night, is like there's something happening that's not supposed to be happening, and it doesn't make sense to them, and then they have to try to make sense out of it. And in that particular case, it's actually a good therapist can help someone through with an open mind, because it's really just finding a way to deal with it, deal with those circumstances with a good therapist or a good spiritual guide, someone that does spiritual counseling. People can be helped through. But there's different types of people that do it, and they have different types of restrictions on what they can do. So I think people can get help.
Can they stop the experiences from happening?
Well, that depends on the person. I don't remember anyone that wasn't able to actually work through it eventually.
Do you think the reason why a lot of people may not be able to stop the experience is that they almost become addicted to it?
I haven't met anybody like that. The only people that I've met that haven't been able to stop their experiences would be people that it wasn't necessarily spiritual. It might have been psychotic, and they might be schizophrenic, and they're having hallucinations, and medication a lot of times helps them stabilize themselves. And it's just not going to go away, and it's dark. It's not light. It's not pleasant.
So for the people whom you have dealt with in regards to ET contact or abduction and, say, some very surreal paranormal experiences, out of all those people, is there a percentage that you've been able to draw on that doesn't lead to any other type of psychosis like bipolar disorder or schizophrenia or anything along those lines?
Well, most of the people that come to me for research have had experiences, and they're okay with them. They work through them. They're not psychotic or bipolar or any of that. There's a difference when a person, in my opinion, it's not real. It's a fantasy created by their mind. Then that requires psychological treatment, not research and things like that. And they're different experiences. One is a fantasy, and the other one might be a real synchronistic kind of weird experience, but people they can handle them. It's the health of the individual.
How do you tell the difference?
Well, that's where you need to. That's where you have to have some training. That's one of the things that I really am glad that I got psychological training, so you can kind of tell the difference between those things. They have to be grounded. People have to be grounded in the real world. Otherwise, things can get out of control.
So the people who you have interviewed who are having these experiences, is there any commonalities between them? Is it more women than men? Or is it more blue-collar people compared to, say, white-collar business suit type people?
No, I found that there's no patterns like that, and the study of phenomenology and qualitative research, the way that I do it, that's not even a factor. It's more like the consciousness. You're studying the consciousness of that experience, the meaning of the experience that the person is sharing. I don't find that there's one group that has more experiences than another, or that there's more women or more men. I think there's just as many men as women, and they come from all backgrounds. I've had people from all different backgrounds.
Do you find that the people who you are investing time in to learn about this, that their lifestyles are different? Is there any sort of commonality, or is it just an individual basis and every experience is different?
Well, that's what I see. I see they're very individual experiences, and each person is different, and they may share common traits in what they share, like, you know, an altercation in time and space and things like that. But there's no commonality in, like, lifestyle. They're not all, you know, white or Hispanic or certain ages or certain, you know, educational levels. It's very mixed. It's a little bit of all. I've had people with PhDs and master's degrees and people with high school diplomas and people that didn't graduate high school and people making no money and people making a lot of money. It just doesn't, I don't think it's really, you know, those aren't relevant to the experience. It's an individual thing.
When it comes to extraterrestrials and the people you were dealing with who were having those experiences, have you ever studied how many people are having positive to negative experiences?
Well, most of the people that had the experience, it was negative at first because they didn't understand what was going on, but then they kind of came to grips with it, so they were okay with it. They weren't quite sure what had taken place in the end. So they knew they had their experience, and for them it was real, and they came to grips with it. So I haven't had anybody that has had real problems with their situation.
Question from Alan here. Being a man of science looking into this, do you still have a belief in God or a higher being or source consciousness?
I have, science is separate from that in the sense that you have, when I investigate something, I try to have a totally neutral view. That's why I really like qualitative phenomenological research. You go in and you try to remove all your biases. You know nothing, and you don't assume you know anything. Personally, my background, both in exploring different religions and my family background, I believe in a little bit of everything. I believe in the Buddhist approach, and I believe in possible reincarnation. I can't prove it, but I think it's possible. I believe in Jesus' principle that love thy neighbor as thyself, and I believe that if we all could love ourselves, we wouldn't do anything else but love someone else. And I believe in the Native Americans' respect for everything, all of life, and that we're all connected and everything is connected. And so I have a little bit of all of that. But when I'm doing my research, I try to set that aside and try to let that person tell me their experience and not put my experience into that. I don't have an answer for what that all is. And when I try to respect other people's views.
Mm-hmm.
The only way we can find the truth is if we don't assume we already know before we go into the experience. But it's also very difficult. Many people can't do that.
So how do you define the professional side from your spiritual side then?
What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, on the scientific side, you know, there's not a lot of belief. It's hardcore fact and evidence, where you're saying you also have a belief in everything as well.
Well, I have my own ideas. I don't have any answers. I've been exposed to so much, I have more questions than answers on what I'm not quite sure what the truth is. And so I have an open mind. I want to know, and I don't claim that I do know. So I think it fits in fine. It's not a conflict, because just because I feel connected to all of life from my Native American side, and that I feel connected to nature and animals, I also have a respect for staying away from something that could hurt me too. You know, but I don't claim to have the answers to all of that. And I think that when my time comes to pass, that's when I'll know. I don't think I can know everything before that at this point. I'm trying to learn more, but I don't have an answer. And I just have respect for different people's points of view. I'm not going to tell an atheist that they have to believe there's something else, and I'm not going to tell a Buddhist that they don't have a right to believe what they believe. I try to respect people's different views and just try to learn from them.
What do you think the biggest piece of information you have learned to date due to all the experiencers you have come in contact with?
Well, I think it comes down to two things that I've learned that I both, two ideas that I both put in my book that I try to remember which goes along with the last question and this question. One is that that fear versus intuition is a big thing. I think we all have to learn to be more intuitive and less fearful. And that doesn't mean blindly going forward without fear, because intuition kind of says, don't do that. And you trust it. And it's real. But fear holds us back because we are afraid to explore, but intuition helps us know when not to. And the other thing is everything's in a unique context. Everything is not the same. Every situation is different. Every circumstance is different. And you have to understand each circumstance to move forward. You can't, your strength will work most of the time, but it's not going to work in one circumstance. Your weakness is not going to help you in many circumstances, but in another circumstance, it actually will help you. So it's almost like letting go of judgment and trying to just be in the present and experience what's going on at that moment.
I have a question from Bill in our audience here. He is asking, do you think it's possible for a spirit to attach itself to a loved one for the duration of their natural life? Maybe where a wife or husband died young and stayed with the other?
Well, it's possible, I guess. I don't know of any circumstances where that happened, but I wouldn't say anything's possible.
I was always intrigued with that because I have a friend of mine named Wendy who lost her husband when she was 21 years old. And she still sees him around, can still feel him and pick up the energy from him as well. I think that is possible. But I guess it would, in my perspective, and please correct me if I'm wrong, in my perspective, wouldn't it be more of a soul connection rather than, say, a loving connection on a human form that would keep that other party around for the duration?
Possible. I've thought about the possibilities. There's so many possibilities. It's possible that our consciousness can be in many places at once. It's possible that there's no time and space, so you could just think and be there and meanwhile be somewhere else. And so who knows? I think it's kind of, it's more than we can possibly understand in our human form, I think. But whether somebody's there for somebody, I certainly wouldn't say that that's not true. I wouldn't want to say that. I mean, I wouldn't want to make that judgment.
I want to get to a question from Catherine here. She is asking, what is your belief in spirits ideas that mix with non-Terran ideas?
With non-what?
Non-Terran. In other words, she's saying extraterrestrial. Like, I guess what she's asking, as I'm rereading the question here, is, do you believe that spiritually and extraterrestrially there is some sort of mixing culture between the two that brings them towards people that are still alive and breathing?
Well, that's possible. I find it hard to believe that if the universe goes on forever and ever, that there's not life somewhere else. So it's kind of hard to think that we're the only thing that exists and we exist in a bubble. But I don't know. I mean, there's talk of dimensions and all kinds of things, but I don't know what the draw is unless it's a connection of some sort. It could be a connection of some sort. But see, then again, I just have an open mind. Why are we connecting? What's going on? I have a question, not an answer. I don't try to say I know why. It's just, want to understand, want to be open to the experience instead of judging it. I remember, it's just trying to be open. That's the hardest thing, is to just be open to learn and to experience without having to know why.
Our resident scientist around these parts, Eric, is asking, and he is actually a scientist, he is asking, do you think science, Dr. Woodard, can actually find answers in the paranormal field?
It is possible. It's just, like I said, we might need a paradigm shift in some way, or an understanding or evolving technology that would suddenly be able to, capture those things in a way that we can't right now.
Go ahead, please.
Well, it's like I said earlier, we already have proven some things, but there's a lot of other things we haven't proven yet.
So what would you like to see proven looking into the future? What's our next step?
I'm not sure, to be honest. I think an opening up to be more aware that there's another reality, that there's another experience, there's other ways of looking at our lives. I don't know. I'm not quite sure. It's like, I think it has to evolve. But if we were to really know that there is life after death, that would alter everything in a way. But you have to be able to prove that. And so far, it's really a belief thing. Some people believe it, some people don't.
How do you think it would alter? Do you think it would alter for the positive or the negative? Do you think people would become less caring if they knew that life did continue on and it was proven?
That's a funny thing. You never know until it happens. That's the thing about evolving. Each evolution brings in new problems, unexpected positives and negatives. It's vague. I know the answer is vague, but I don't see it as a concrete answer. With each evolution, as we learn more, we change. And as we change, there's things we don't expect that happen, and then we grow from that. I don't have a clear answer of where that's going. I just think that there's a difference between learning, understanding, and respecting knowledge as we grow, and controlling and manipulating. And that's the thing that I think is bad. The bad aspect of our society is everything has to be controlled and manipulated. And I don't think that's what it's about. I think it's more about respect, learning, growing, and embracing in a healthy, positive, loving way, rather than a controlling, manipulative way. And I think each time we gain new knowledge, we have to face those different forces.
The reason why I ask is, I am a firm believer, and I've mentioned it many a times on this show, that I do not believe mankind in general is ready for ET contact and or disclosure. And I'm wondering if you think that it would be the equivalent of finding out that there is truly life after death. Because when it comes to ET disclosure, I strongly believe that there is going to be a Pandora's box that opens, and there is going to be a ripple effect that goes through society from lawsuits galore, because people will be suing the government for what they knew or what they were holding back and allowing this to happen to everyday citizens, to the fact that a lot of religious people will have a hard time with it. I think people will say, you know what, screw it. I'm not going into work anymore, and I'm going to the beach forever. It's going to cause a very big pandemic of panic. Do you see that happening the same thing, or potentially with the idea of maybe proving that there is life after death? Would people go more so to the negative of not caring anymore because there's no consequence?
Well, that's an interesting question, because it's like, you don't know until it happens what will happen. That's the bottom line. I mean, I think that's true of everything that's ever evolved. There's good and bad that comes out of it. It may help in certain ways, and in other ways it might not. I mean, I remember reading somewhere that some people claim that, past life, reincarnation was part of all religious beliefs until a certain point in time when it was changed. And they thought that if people only had one life that they would live more righteously. But I don't know if that's true, you know, so it can go either way. But I also think that there's a lot of people that might be just doing whatever they want because they don't think there's anything else. And then if they find out there's something else, that might change. But then again, what is that something else? And is, you know, I don't have any of those. It's such a wide open possibilities and ideas of what that is. You know, is there judgment? Is there no judgment? Do you know, my God, it's just, that's where all those religious ideas, millions of them, from all different points of view come forward. Some very judgmental and some very wide open, like it's just all loving and forgiveness. But what is it?
I have no idea. I'm lost on the whole thing, too.
Right, I don't either. I couldn't answer that. So it's like, I just think, you know, we'll eventually, if there's life after death, we're obviously going to find out. It's not going to change because we believe one thing or another. If there's nothing, we'll never know. That's really all I know. And at this point is, you know, one or the other. I mean, I want to believe there's something more, obviously. I mean, I think most people do. But I don't have that answer. I have a lot of the stories that people have told me, a lot of the experiences really make me think there's got to be something more, that there is something going on that I don't completely understand. And that's what keeps me going. But I don't have the ultimate answers. I just have ideas.
Let's get to a question from Craig here, and he is asking, I can see you have an in-depth knowledge of the mind and perception, and how being rigid in beliefs affects our communication and progress, either blocking new research or stopping communication. Do you think this is a derivative of ego by the field, and do you think this is a bane to mankind?
Well, I think it's one of the problems we have to face to grow, to expand your awareness, to see more. Like I said earlier, it's when I walked around the block and I couldn't walk for 2 days. I would have been one of the people that would have saw me walk around the block and said, oh, he's fine, no problem. But after that experience, I realized, oh, it's not so simple. So, I don't know. I mean, I think that, you know, there's people that are blocking progress because they're invested in what they're doing or what they know or the way things are, but there's also the push for progress, and progress can't be stopped. It eventually will happen, and it's just it's hard to know for sure. I mean, those are things I really don't have answers to, like solid answers. It's just, like I said, context and just moving forward, trying to live each moment and grow and open up to see more, to understand more, to experience more.
We're going to get a brand new listener here, Tracy in Nanaimo. Tracy, thank you so much for listening. Nanaimo is on Vancouver Island here in British Columbia, and that's my former hometown. Lived there for a couple of years. So, Tracy, thank you so much for checking us out. I started at the old Sea Keg in Nanaimo, 1570 AM. No longer there. It's an FM station now. Anyhow, Tracy is asking, Dr. Woodard, have you ever felt a paranormal attachment to yourself that was hard to get rid of?
I have felt a negative energy around me when I was in a certain place or with certain people. It's a sense of a feeling. I'm hard to say if it was an attachment or not, but I could pick up different energies. It's sort of like you do that even with people. You can sense somebody being happy or being angry, even if they don't necessarily show that. But I have felt negative energies at times. I haven't felt like, I don't know that something attached to me, but I try to cleanse myself and stay grounded and protect myself from things too on a regular basis. So I don't take on negative energy.
Do you believe in what a lot of people believe in, saging yourself and putting the protective bubble barriers around you, spiritually speaking?
I think those are healthy habits. Whether that bubble is literally real or it's some symbolic message to the greater part of your mind that we don't understand that actually makes it happen, I think it's a positive thing to do. I interviewed one person once who told me that I was going to tell him it was wrong what he was going to tell me, and he told me that he would astral project into crowds and just take people's energy, and that he could do that because they didn't protect themselves. And I then told him, I think that's wrong, yes. And he said, well, they don't protect themselves, so that's their fault. And I was like, well, that's not really something that I think is positive. There's other ways to take care of yourself without doing that. But there are people that claim they do those things. So, and I think there are negative energy takers. You can call them spiritual vampires or psychic vampires or energy vampires who enjoy getting you feeling bad, and then that somehow satisfies them. And if you learn how to protect yourself so you don't get upset, that's less likely to hurt you. And they'll find somebody else. They'll stop doing it to you if you don't let them. But there's people that wrote about that.
Do you believe then, and this question comes from Adam in our chat room, that, or let me rephrase this. He's saying, do you believe, Doctor, that there is family attachment, that the same spirit goes along with the same family generation after generation?
I don't know that I believe that, but I actually read somewhere, I think it was a psychiatrist that was an Indian doctor from India, not a Native American, who had done some regression work with people who claimed that when they left and went back to the other world, that the attachments dropped off of them, and then when they came back and were reborn, the attachment attached again. I think I read something about that, but I have no experience with that.
I guess that would be the same thing as saying, family reincarnation. Once they die, they come right back into the same family. Because in India, they have had some very strange experiences. I remember watching one documentary where a young lad at 5 years old picked out his murderer from his previous life. And there's plenty of examples like that.
Ian Stevenson, Dr. Ian Stevenson, who passed away recently, he was a member of the Society of Scientific Exploration like I am. He did a lot of work with stuff like reincarnation, and I believe it was him or one of his colleagues that was talking about people would actually have birthmarks where they had injuries. And they came back in the next life and say they injured their leg, and the next life they have a birthmark in that same spot. So there was and there have been children that I've read, I think it was Tucker and Ian Stevenson's work, where they actually had kids that couldn't possibly know what they know, and then they'd go investigate, and they'd bring the child, and the child meets their parents who are like 80 years old, and they're only 6, and they're going, yeah, it's my mother and father, and then someone walks in the house from the neighbors. Oh, that's the neighbor. Never saw the person in their life. So yeah, there's some very interesting, intriguing work that really suggests that reincarnation is valid. I was very impressed with Dr. Stevenson's work. And being with children, it was like to remove the whole idea of adults taking in information in other ways and forgetting they took it in, which is a big problem too. The more you learn and the more you're exposed to, you don't remember everything you know and everything you've learned. So it's hard to know if you haven't picked up knowledge here or there and then apply it later to something else, or not realize where the information came from. But children, they have such limited experience, young children, that you don't have to worry about that as much. So that's why I think they focused on the younger children, because it was a lot easier. There wasn't a lot of exposure.
Do you think we need to pay attention to children's experiences with the supernatural and paranormal a little bit more? Because a lot of intuitive people believe that children are still very connected to the spiritual side up until around 6 or 7.
Well, that's that same area of work with Ian Stevenson and them. Yes, the problem with all that is children are really under the care of their parents, and it really becomes an issue of whether the parents are want what the parents want, because children don't really have any say without their parents. So if their parents are open to those things, then it's okay, but if their parents aren't, then it's not. And so paying attention to children, I don't really work with children because the consent comes from the parents. I work with adults with the research. I've worked only with 1 or 2 children, but their parents brought them and wanted me to talk to them. But a lot of it's very touchy in the sense of the parents. If the parents are open, the children can be open. But if the parents aren't open, then it's hard for the children to be open until they're able to speak for themselves.
Do you believe then that when it comes to reincarnation, though, we should be listening to children's stories?
Well, I think they've already done that, and I think that it's like, how do they know these things? The cases that have been presented are fascinating. So I guess it's like I said, those are touchy things because of the parental consent thing. Where parents really have the rights over their children. So if they don't want to talk, they don't want their kids talking about that stuff, then they can't. And some parents do. And then you have to make sure, too, the children haven't been influenced by their parents to say things or to be exposed to things, too.
Reason why I asked that, Dr. Woodard, is because for a lot of parents, when they hear their children say a story about, I remember being in an airplane or, driving in a car or something along those lines, we always seem to, as parents, take it as just childish imagination. And yet when it comes down to reality, it may be something that they are recalling from a previous life. So in your experience with what you know, should or is your recommendation for parents to have a little bit of a closer listen to what their children have to say?
Well, I mean, my experience with people in general is that it is important to listen to your children, to validate them and help them understand. If it's a fantasy, then, children, then they work through it. You help them work through it. And if it's something that seems to be like, my God, if your child's never seen their grandmother who passed, and then they say they're talking to grandma, and then all of a sudden they say, that's grandma, and they show you a picture of her, they've never seen her, and you didn't tell them that, that's kind of interesting. It's like, wow, how do they know that? But of course, then again, like I say, parapsychologists could say telepathically in other ways they could have picked up the information, which makes it difficult. But I think I used to work with a lot more children than I do now, and it is important to validate children because children can work through stuff. They have a lot of they can really work through their problems and their issues if you validate them. If you shut them down, it's hard sometimes for them to process their feelings and grow. But good parents listen to their children and, help them in whatever way is right. Every situation, again, is different. It's hard for me to say any particular guidelines, but, there's a lot of good parents out there, and they're really nurturing and supportive of their children, and they're protective, and they do what's right for their kids,
I know with our kids, we've tried to keep very open. That's one thing that we have tried to do over the years, is just be open to their experiences. My daughter, who's now 18, I remember her seeing her first ghost, her telling me about her first ghost when she was about 2 years old. She kept saying that over top of her nightstand, her dresser, that there was always a white cloud over that. But it never scared her. And so I think for a lot of parents, they're not very open to it. Maybe they're scared of it. Do you think parental fear comes into play when parents start hearing their children talk about these sorts of things? And maybe that's what eludes many of these great stories that we could be sharing in research.
Well, I don't know. I prefer, children, I respect their parents. It's like really, you can't really, it's just too touchy. It's like parents have the right to decide what's okay for their children to do or not do. And so it's difficult if the parents want to talk about those things or let their children talk about those things, then that happens. If they don't, then it's not going to happen. There's nothing you can do about that. You got to respect people for where they are.
We only have... Sorry, go ahead, sir.
The problem with children, too, is if they start sharing things that they think are real or may not be real with other kids, they could, be picked on or laughed at, and that's not pleasant either.
Oh, trust me, I know that all too well. Our middle daughter, she is 14, but when she was, I believe it was 8 or 9, she started telling stories about how her house was haunted in class. And we had to gently put it to her that might not be a very good idea to do that. Because
right.
all of a sudden, her friends told their kids stories about what was happening at our house, and all of a sudden there just wasn't as many friends coming over anymore.
Right, and it's just a loaded question because some kids do make up stuff. And so, again, we're talking about what's real and what's not real, and how do you really know that, and that's a very difficult thing. I don't always look at things from that perspective as a psychologist or as a researcher. I always kind of respect people. There's a meaning. People experience things for a meaning, and you help them work out the meaning, and then the experience goes away. If it's like it's got a purpose. Everything has a purpose, but it doesn't mean that it's always absolutely real. It might be a fantasy that's happening for some reason. And so each situation individually to help that person work through their feelings.
Oh, I absolutely agree with you. Absolutely agree. We got a quick question here from Tracy. She says, I understand energies come and go, but do you believe when paranormal doors are open, perhaps in childhood with things like Ouija boards, seances, etc., that they can follow you eternally or until consciously expelled?
I don't know. My experience is I've never used Ouija boards or any of that stuff, and I wouldn't recommend them being used. So I think that there's the way it was explained to me. There's the higher and lower levels of connection, and that's a lower level of connection. Not that it's always negative, but it's just that there's higher levels of connecting. So I don't have any exposure to that. I've had a few clients tell me very negative things happened while they were playing with Ouija boards, and they stopped. So
we're actually doing a live Ouija board session here on Halloween.
Oh, really?
We did it last year with Karen Dahlman, and she is coming back this Halloween as well. So on Halloween night, we're going to be doing the live Ouija board session just to see what pops up. We'll be asking all sorts of questions. You should pop in on that one. Pop in on that one.
Yeah, I have no experience with that.
I don't really either, but honestly, it scares the daylights out of me. But I'd still go for it. We're going to do it. I'm a rebel that way around these parts. Go ahead, sir.
No, I said I have no experience with that, so I wouldn't really know what to tell you.
We only got about 4.5 minutes left with you tonight, Dr. Woodard. I'm wondering if you would just briefly, and an overview of everything that we have talked about tonight, give an overview of where you would like to see the paranormal go in, say, the next 5 to 10 years.
I think that reporting the experiences accurately that have taken place may be a uniform, summary of all this knowledge being put together, and maybe we could see some patterns and understand some things better if everybody's experiences were organized better and shared. We might get a better idea of what's really going on. But first we have to collect all the information.
And that's the tough part. Is it getting more people involved, especially educated scientists involved? Is that the key?
Well, it's like I said at the beginning, it's not just a matter of education. It's like just, it can be someone with an education, without an education, but really being able to express and describe their experiences in a way that other people can relate or understand them can be very helpful, I think. I think there's a lot for us to learn. It's a frontier area, so I just keep trying to, understand it. I think we've been doing this for a long time, a couple hundred years probably, or less, maybe 150 years, the 1800s or something. But we're still learning. We still haven't mastered it. So I just continue to work the way I'm doing, and trying to open things up from the perspective of finding those patterns, and that's all I really know how to do, so that's what I'm trying to do. Everyone has a different role, so if everyone comes together with what they have to offer, we might actually make another step at some point.
Well, the research in where you are going from here, where does it take you? Where would you like to see yourself in this field, in what you have the ability to learn over the next few years?
Well, I'm in the process of working on my book, Perceptual Hypnosis, is my first book. I had done a dozen articles, professional journal articles that were peer-reviewed, and I'm in the process of starting a second book, which summarizes all the experiences and all the people that I interviewed, their experiences in a more, in what I said, more of patterns and general, and seeing where everything connects, and summarizing the things that they all share, all these different experiences share, and that's what I have to offer. But, each person has to take their research and see what they can pull out of it. And if everybody does that, maybe, and we all put it together, it might add up to something. It's sort of like the field of science in general. You get all these different books from all these different doctors and scientists that explore things. When you put it all together, it adds up to something.
Mm-hmm. Well,
a person might have something different to offer. I can only do what I'm doing with the research that comes to me and the way I can perceive it and what I can pull out of it, but somebody else might have something else to offer and might have a different angle, and then you put those two together and it might lead to something bigger. You know what I mean?
It totally could. It totally could. And that's just, I guess, the way that we got to continue the study.
Right. I mean, it's like I've read all of John Mack's work, and that, to me, was a great contribution to the field of the UFO abduction stuff. Was just a great contribution. And, if people keep doing things like that, it might all add up to something.
Dr. Fredrick Woodard, thank you so much for being on Spaced Out Radio tonight. What a pleasure to have you with us and share your stories. Please allow our audience to know where they can find your book again.
My book can be picked up at any bookstore, and Amazon, and Schiffer Publishing is where it was published online. And there's a lot of online places you can get it, but Amazon and Schiffer Publishing are the ones that I'm aware of. It's Perceptual Hypnosis, the spiritual journey toward expanding awareness.
Appreciate your time, my friend. We got to do it again. That went way too fast.
Yes. Well, we will have to do it again. And I have appreciated being on here. And like I said, I have a lot of respect for your show. And
thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. I'm going to get you to hold on here. I'm going to wrap this thing up. Mr. Ron Bumblefoot THAL playing in the background. Little brother is watching. Bumblefoot is the official music of Spaced Out Radio. Tomorrow night, Dave Cruz is back in the cabin for Spaced Out Saturdays, 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time. He gets going at spacedoutradio.com. Same time and place for Sunday with Cosmic Passport, Spaced Out Sundays with Elizabeth Anglin. Yes, the weekend crew is back. I'm heading off into the wilderness to find my Zen and my Chi, and maybe see if Sasquatch is still around after the forest fires. Don't worry about me. I'm all good. I want to thank my team, Everett Thiemer and Eric Markham from The Encounter Online, Tim Doyle, Jolene Lammers on web design, Catherine James, social media, Bob Davis, our great announcer, Kim Gandy, our director of business management. That is our Spaced Out Radio team. And don't forget, Leslie Mitchell-Clark from LMC Media in Toronto helps us out as well. But most of all, we thank all of you for sharing the show, bringing our ratings up, telling a friend, sharing it on social media. And with your help, my friends, we own the night. Mr. Bumblefoot, do us a favor. Take us home for the weekend. Good night, everyone. See you Monday.